The time is now 6 o'clock. We'll go ahead and start the meeting. Notice to citizens, the city commissioners are conducting city business in person. The commission meeting is open to the public. Citizens may also observe the meeting by going online to Town Hall Streams. Citizens may call in their public comment at the appropriate time by calling into the meeting at 410-228-5808, or citizens may participate in the meeting by joining via Microsoft Teams. At this time, we'll stand. And we will invite Rabbi Jordan Goldson to the podium at this time to lead us in our invocation.
As we enter this new year, O God, we acknowledge that our lives are filled with blessing. And yet, O God, we know that we are living in difficult times. We've witnessed the struggle of those in our communities who are unable to provide for their families. Yet we cannot merely pray to you, O God, to provide help, for you have given us compassion, the ability to reach out if we would only choose generosity instead of greed. We cannot merely pray to you, O God, to end war, for we know that you have made the world in such a way that we humans must find our own path to peace within ourselves and with our neighbors. We cannot merely pray to you, O God, to end starvation, for you have already given us resources with which to feed the whole wide world, if we would only use them wisely. We cannot merely pray to you, O God, to root out prejudice, for you have already given us eyes with which to see the good in all people, if we would only use them rightly. We cannot merely pray to you, O God, to end despair, for you have already given us the power to clear away slums and to give hope, if we would only use our power justly. We cannot merely pray to you, O God, to end disease, for you have already given us great minds with which to search out cures and healings, if we would only use them constructively. We cannot merely pray to you, O God, to recognize and celebrate love in all its forms, for you have already given us the gift of love, if we would only truly love all our neighbors as we love ourselves. Therefore, O God, we pray to you instead for strength, determination, and wisdom to do what we can, to do what we must, to do instead of just to pray, to become instead of merely to wish. May you bless us and protect us. May your light shine upon us and be gracious to us. May you inspire us and grant us peace. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi Goldson of the Temple Benai, for that invocation. I also would invite Mr. Jyree Brooks to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. That's one thing that our former Mayor Steve Rideout would do if we saw a young person present, that we would invite them to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So Jyree, if you would invite us and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Just for the record, Mayor LaJane Cephas Bay is attending virtually as she is committed at another event representing the city, and Commissioner Louis Cisco will be joining us later in the meeting. At this time, we would entertain any amendments or motion to approve or amend the agenda as presented.
Motion to approve the agenda.
So motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the agenda has been approved as presented. Next item on the agenda is our presentations, and at this time we will award the citations to the 13U Vikings football team. There are quite a few of you, and I will do my very best to pronounce your names correctly. What I'm going to do is read all the names. I'm going to read one citation, and I'm going to give them to Mr. Morris, and then you can present them to whomever they belong. Actually, as I call your name, if you'll just line up across the front. Let's do it that way. Dante Henry Jr., Damari Tuck. I'm sorry?
Some of them not here.
Okay, so the ones that are here, if you'll just line up across the front, we'll give, and again, we'll present them to the coach, and then we'll proceed forward. Damari Todd, Caitlin Wolford, Caden Jones, Josiah Diaz, Sergio Martinez, Isaiah Harvey, Christopher Cornish, Zayden Edmonds, Nehemiah Hill, Tavion Paisley, Quincy Jones, Azim DeShields, Carter Dawkins, Devontae DeShields, Taquan Williams, Trayvon Johnson, Caden Davenport, Kristen Prophet, Bentley Cordesis, Mason Moore, Zion Wolford, Jyree Brooks, Richard Garrett, Deshelle Haynes, Anthony Hughes, Jamez Justice, Trevonte McCready, Dennis Prophet, Leasia Todd, and Joseph Morris. All right, gentlemen. So this, actually, I'm going to bend the rules a bit. If you'll turn around to the audience. Look this way,
The wide angle.
Okay, you got one more.
Forgot a name.
I read the names on the list, sir, but what name did I forget?
Trenton Longest.
Well, Trenton Morris can come on up, and if we don't have a citation for him, we'll make sure he gets it. No, Trenton, come on up.
Come on, Trent, let's go.
All right, citation to read. The City of Cambridge, Maryland. Be it hereby known, because of your demonstration of high integrity and ability, merit and respect of the citizens of the City of Cambridge, sincerest congratulations are offered to all of you young men. Your vision, leadership. Actually, no, that's for the coach. Let's do this. All right, here we go. Your outstanding athletic achievement, exceptional teamwork, and unwavering perseverance reflect the bright spirit and promise of our community's youth. Your dedication and commitment to excellence earned the third place national championship trophy, along with other titles, Bayside champions, regional champions. These accomplishments stand as an inspiration to your peers and a source of pride for your family, coaches, and the City of Cambridge. We commend your success and encourage you to continue striving for excellence in all that you do. Presented this 12th day of January 2026, and this is signed by the mayor and all of the commissioners. Can we give our young men a round of applause? And I'll ask if our other commissioners will join us around so we can grab a photo real quick. We'll present these. Actually, can we kind of make two rows on here, student, and we'll get behind you guys. I brought you. And so actually, just before you all leave, we do want to hear from if our coaches wish to address the audience at this time. We'll hear from you for just a brief moment.
We just want to say we appreciate the support, the love, from the community, from just everybody around. I mean, we had, people donating to help these young men go do something no Dorchester team's ever done before. 23 kids to Florida was not easy, and keep them under wraps. The help of the community and the love from the community, you guys, made this happen for us. So I am forever grateful for you because this was my last year doing youth football. So you guys really appreciate it, and just preparing for all things. Love the kids. Can't wait till they come play for me at the high school now. So y'all have a great night, and thank you so much.
And Mr. Wongus, we'll make sure that we get the citation for Trenton. We'll make sure we get the citation for Trenton. We'll make sure, if there's no citation there, we'll make sure you guys have that tomorrow. Okay, so do me a favor, if you can get with Brandon, Hudson, our assistant city manager, Brandon, wave your hand. Just let him know the names or get his information and then get the names and we'll make sure we get it. All right, at this time we're going to invite Cambridge Main Street to the front for a presentation. This citation reads as such: the City of Cambridge, Maryland official citation. Being hereby known because of your demonstration of high integrity and ability, merit in the respect of the citizens of the City of Cambridge, sincerest congratulations are offered to Cambridge Main Street in recognition of appreciation of your exceptional dedication and unwavering commitment to the revitalization and success of our Main Street district. Through your vision, leadership, and tireless efforts, you have helped create a vibrant, welcoming, and thriving downtown that reflects the spirit and pride of our community. Your contributions have strengthened local businesses, fostered community engagement, and preserved the unique character that makes our Main Street a destination for residents and visitors alike. This recognition honors not only your achievements, but also the lasting impact you have made in shaping a brighter future for our city. And this is presented to you all, signed by our mayor and all of the commissioners of the City of Cambridge, along with a key to the city. So at this time, we want to present this to the director and to the board of the Cambridge Main Street. We'll ask that the commissioners will join us at this time. And I'll actually ask the Commissioner Summers will present the key.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cambridge Main Street. Commissioners, you guys can actually stand here. We will invite the Dorchester Elks Lodge 223. The Elks Lodge 223.
And we're under occupancy.
Yes. Gentlemen, you can- And your citation reads as such. Be it hereby known because of your demonstration of high integrity and ability, meriting the respect of the citizens of the city of Cambridge, sincerest congratulations are offered to Dorchester Elks Lodge number 223. In recognition of your many years of dedicated service and unwavering commitment, your tireless efforts, integrity, and generosity have enriched the lives of countless individuals and strengthened the bonds of fellowship. Through your leadership and steadfast devotion, you have set a standard of excellence that will inspire others for years to come. Your contributions reflect not only remarkable work ethic, but also a genuine passion for service and community. We honor your legacy and celebrate the positive impact you have made, knowing that your influence will endure for generations. Again, this is signed by our mayor and all the commissioners of the city of Cambridge. We present you this official citation and a key to the city as well.
May I just speak and just say that we are the Improved Benevolent Protective Order of the World. We are an international organization, but we are, and we do what we do because we have a strong ladies behind us who support us, and they're present this afternoon. So we will ask them if they will stand under the leadership of daughter Ruth Sharon Chester. On behalf of the organization, we thank you very much for the key to the city. Now, well, we'll just take it in stride.
See, whatever door opens, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And we have one last presentation. Oh, one more. Invite the members of Eagle Man and Iron Man to come forward at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, your citation reads, be it hereby known, because of your demonstration of high integrity and ability, meriting the respect of the citizens of the city of Cambridge, sincerest congratulations are offered to Eagle Man and Iron Man. In recognition of your many years of dedicated service and committed to excellence, your races have brought athletes and visitors from around the world, creating a positive and lasting impact on our communities. Through your efforts, you have strengthened local pride, boosted economic vitality, and showcased the beauty of our city. We extend our heartfelt gratitude for your continued partnership and contributions to Cambridge's success. Presented on this 12th day of January 2026, signed by our mayor and all the commissioners of the city of Cambridge. Can we celebrate Eagle Man and Iron Man? I'll ask the Commissioner Roach will present the key.
Finally, run one chase.
Thank you.
Huh? Oh, Frank. Hey, you're up, Frank.
And if you all wish to address the audience, you will do so this time, please.
Yes, I would just like to thank the city for their support. Over the years, we're going into our 12th year of Ironman Maryland and our 30th year of Eagle Man. We're very excited about that, and we couldn't do it without the support of the city and all of the residents welcoming the athletes to our community and creating such a welcoming environment that they want to come back to year after year. It's a tremendous success, and could ask for a better place to put on these events. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 4 on the agenda would be a presentation, topic violence in Dorchester County Public Schools by Lakeisha Graves. Is Lakeisha Graves present? Is Lakeisha Graves on the WebEx?
She's not.
Again, is Lakeisha Graves present?
It might have been might be a fault of my office.
Okay.
We'll just leave it.
So there will be no presentation from Mrs. Graves. And at this time, we'll hear from Chase Powell from Green Street with the presentation on the Hearn Building update.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. All right, well, thank you all for inviting me to speak. As much as I did enjoy being a fly on the wall at the last meeting, I'm happy to have the mic tonight. So, yeah, I'm here to talk about the Hearn Building and our planned development plan for the parcels from 505 to 509 Ray Street. Yep, thank you. So we can go to the next slide. Brian told me that I was to overview my involvement with this project and do a little bit of a history lesson as to how we got here. So I'm going to talk about how we got here. Now, mind you, a lot of this was before my time. This involved some Googling, a little bit of ChatGPT as well, to figure out what happened and when. And I've got some pictures in my presentation later that will outline some of this as well. But my goal here is to kind of establish a chronology of what has happened to the buildings at 505 to 509 Ray Street, but also talk about my involvement and then Green Street's involvement as well as Maryland DHCD. So that being said, on December 16th of 2012, 507 Ray Street caught on fire from arson. There was significant damage to the property at that time. However, from what I can gather, it was still deemed structurally sound, right? Let's jump forward to October of 2015. That's where the partial collapse of the south wall adjacent to the Tolly Theater occurred. I've got some pictures later to show that damage. At that time, I believe it was a local public works official said that wind could have been a factor in the collapse of the building. I believe at that point as well that the roof had partially already caved in and water damage had started to accumulate in the existing structure. By October of 2016, the south wall was stabilized with funds from Maryland DHCD. I believe at that time that was under the stewardship of, or in tandem with Stan Kaiser, who was the prior developer on the project. May of 2018, partial collapse of 507 Ray Street. From what I can gather, that was purely just time, deterioration, rain, all the above. Now, obviously, there was fire damage back in 2012. I know there was a minor effort from the city to stabilize the structure in 2012. But, you know, as things collapse over time and they fall apart, you know, more damage ensues. Not even a week later, the city council unanimously decided to demolish 507 Ray Street. I believe that was at the city's expense to the tune of about $250,000 for that demolition. Next slide, please. So I apologize for the small font here, but shortly after the demolition of 507 Ray Street is when I was formally involved in the project, and that was by way of Stan Kaiser, and at the time they were known as NCAL, but they now operate as Neighborhood Partners. So we were brought in more or less to see if we could work alongside Stan to figure out how we could preserve the development plan that was there. At that time, I believe he had 25 or 26 multifamily apartment units contemplated. He was going to use the existing floor plan. You know, it was going to work with the building as it was, where it was. And I do not think he had any kind of concept for 505 at that time. I believe it was just for the Hearn. So jump forward to fall of 2019. So when we first got involved with this project, it wasn't multifamily housing, it wasn't workforce housing. We were actually contemplating a new markets tax credit transaction. If you're not familiar with new markets tax credits, it's a form of tax credit that's awarded through CDFIs for projects of a commercial, not necessarily a commercial bend, but generally a commercial bend, and it's a form of equity that more or less bridges your development for about 7 years. So it's used to do all kinds of things. For example, the Boys and Girls Club of America in town actually has a new markets tax credit award for that building, right? So that's where we started. We weren't actually going to do multifamily, and we were looking at bringing in an institutional user to the building. We had started underwriting rents. That's where we began. But then due to the COVID-19 pandemic, that user had to back out of the development due to uncertainty around their funds. So May of 2022, that's when the secretary of the time, Mr. Ken Holt, encouraged us to pursue a workforce housing development. We had a meeting with him where he said, hey, we have the resources here. We would like for you all to figure out how to make this work through the low-income housing tax credit program and other resources from Maryland DHCD. So November of 2022, we do some initial due diligence. We put together our initial application. We applied for tax credits, and we also applied for funds from what is called the Multifamily Capital Fund. This is a funding source that was generated specifically for 7 or 8 projects around the state of Maryland that were deemed to have a high economic activation potential for the municipalities that they were located in. So that program was actually contemplated with the Hearn building in mind, knowing that it needed an inordinate amount of resources to activate the properties and bring them back into functional use. So January of 2023, all the while through this timeline, we had been having multiple meetings with planning staff. I made a few cameos in front of the commissioners. I think we had a few meetings with the planning commission kind of early on just to test the waters. But in January of 2023, that's when we worked alongside the city, along with neighborhood partners, Becker Morgan, and then Harkins Builders. More or less, that's when we got the large concrete blocks off of the sidewalk, reopened the sidewalk, stabilized the 505 building, and had a minor stabilization effort within the Hearn building as well. So next slide, please. So February 7th, that's when we went to the Planning Commission for the first time, and then we went again in June, and then in August of 23, we went to the Historic Preservation Commission for the first time. June of 23, that's when the stabilization work was completed and the sidewalk was reopened. And then we continued our standard kind of fare of due diligence and design work. And then in January of 2024, that's when we had our second Historic Preservation Commission meeting, and that's when we received conditional approval on our concept. I'll get to the evolution of the concept in a little bit. And then we were directed at that time by the HPC to get the blessing of the Maryland Historic Trust, right? And that's an important detail because that shaped a lot of the next year and a half of our involvement in the project. So we began formal collaboration with MHT and Maryland CDA in May of 2024, and then we came to the Planning Commission in June of 2024, and that's when we received unanimous approval for our concept. At that time, our concept was the preservation of the Hearn and then a totally new 505 building, just a date stamp where we were there. Next slide, please. So then in September of 2024, we started, or not started, I should say, we continued our due diligence with respect to further structural analysis and environmental reports. What we found in these reports, and I'm going to dive into that in a little bit, prompted us to pursue changing direction on the concept plan as it relates to whether or not we wanted to preserve the Hearn. What we found in those reports led us down the road we're on now, which is raising the Hearn building and preserving the facade, and then the demolition of 505. And then in light of what we found, in light of the change of the concept, we had to resubmit to the Maryland Historic Trust through their online portal. It's like 203, and then go through that whole process once more. February 2025, Maryland CDA brought in Maryland DHCD Community Preservation to work alongside us to more or less liaison between MHT, CDA, and so the updated MHT process began. April of 2025, that's when concurrence was provided for consulting parties. June 23rd, MHT and DHCD hosted a meeting with the consulting parties that were identified. So that included Dorchester County Historical Society, Dorchester County Tourism, Cambridge Main Street, Preservation Maryland, and the City of Cambridge were all part of that meeting, and that followed a public notification process for input on that meeting. So after that meeting, the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, the ACHP, concluded that their participation was not necessary in the project as it pertains to the historic nature of the project and our intent to raise the structures. Then in July of 25, the draft memorandum of agreement between Maryland DHCD, MHT, and Green Street was circulated. That memorandum of agreement basically outlines the requirements that we have to proceed under with our intent to demolish the structures. It outlines the necessary historic preservation and documentation that's associated with the raising of those structures, as well as a few other criteria. And those criteria were actually generated from the consulting parties meeting. So the final MOA was received on October 29th of 2025. I know that was a mouthful, but the point being is that there was a moment where we went to the HPC and they said, okay, go get the blessing of MHT. And a year and a half later, we now have the blessing, right? So in December, we went before the HPC for informal review. That is what is that was the domino to the events that we have now, and the resolution that you all had drafted at one of your prior meetings. So I'm going to get into the iterations of the concept and that sort of thing.
Chase, one quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Do y'all own the building now, or just under contract?
We are under contract with Neighborhood Partners. Yep.
Okay, got it.
Yep. So now I want to do a little bit of a visual history of the Hearn to understand where it was, how it evolved, and how we got where we are now. I want to take a moment to pay special attention to this photo. This is around 1921. As you can see, there is obviously a continuous streetscape. So here you have the Hearn building, then you have what was 507, and then you have what is 505. I'll get to it in a little bit, but ultimately, at the HPC meeting on December 17th, we were tasked with trying to emulate this. We were tasked with trying to come back to a continuous streetscape that conforms with other uses and other buildings in downtown Cambridge. This is a departure from what we've been doing in the past, but this is what HPC directed us to do. So, you know, the goal is that we want to try to emulate this in some capacity. Obviously, it won't be exactly the same. But anyhow, next slide. Okay, so this is October 28th of 2015. And this is when the wall collapsed on the Hearn building. The roof continued to cave in. I want to pay special attention to over here. That is where the wall collapsed. When we're thinking about preserving a structure, we are now talking about preserving maybe, what, 2/3 of what was historically there, right? Next slide, please. So that's another view. As you can see, the roof was gone. This had all caved in, the hole in the side. Next slide. So that's a close-up view of the south wall when it collapsed. This is actually a picture of 507 and some of the existing fire damage. But the picture I want to paint here is that, you know, obviously it's devastating to have a wall collapse. Fortunately, nobody was hurt in the incident. But at the same time, when we're talking about preserving a building, we're preserving a building that's already had a piece restored, right? So next slide, please. So this is around 2016. Obviously, the Hearn is stabilized at this point. 507 is still standing. However, it had not been demolished by the city. And then 505 is, obviously still there. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of the Hearn at the time that we came into the equation. So this would have been in 2019. So as you can see, obviously, 507 had been demolished at this point. The Hearn was still being held up. It did not have a roof on it yet. So, when you think about a structure not having a roof, obviously the elements are going to play into the equation. Rainwater is going to penetrate the ground over time. It's going to damage the foundations. It's going to damage the footers. It's going to irreparably compromise the structural integrity of what is there. Right. It's also kind of obvious, but you're still talking about a building that's being held up on one side and supported in the back. And then next slide, please. This is the interior of the Hearn effective today. I know not everybody has been inside of this building, but the goal here is to demonstrate we are talking about the bones, right? There is no, framing that preserves any kind of meaningful historic features. As you can see, there's still a lot of accumulated water down at the slab. These floor joists in here, those were installed, as far as I can tell, by Stan Kaiser before there was a roof on the building, right? So those are compromised. They're not usable in a development plan. But I'm just giving you a sense of, while it is a big, massive structure, and that's great, it wouldn't, be absurd to say that in some sense it's kind of being held together with bubble gum and popsicle sticks, right? So next slide, please. And this is the Hearn. I took this picture like 4 or 5 months ago, but this is obviously where it stands today. So that's the alley on the Tolly Theater, of course. The building is still being supported, right? It can't actually stand on its own. It does have a roof on it, and it has been stabilized, but it has been stabilized in such a way to keep what is there upright. I do not believe it's been stabilized in such a way that it could stand on its own at this time, right? So next slide, please. And to what I was just saying, again, this is the rear of the building. It's still being supported. This is the alley at Tolly Theater. This block of concrete is like 4 feet tall and like 20 feet deep. It's a massive amount of concrete that's supporting the wall that was ultimately replaced. So next slide, please. So I wanted to do the visual history just to demonstrate what the building was, what it has become, and what we're dealing with today. Obviously, I've been involved in varying capacities in this project, but ultimately we were involved as a contract purchaser with the stabilization efforts around the front facade, right? But I want to make it clear, I had no involvement in the roof beyond being told what the plans were. That was at neighborhood NGP's discretion for the installation of the roof. I just want to make it clear that while I'm the contract purchaser, the design choices, the structural choices, the choices on preserving the structure up until this point, while I've had some involvement in, they've been made by other parties, right? So if we rewound to 2015 and I had the information that I had now, I would have probably made decisions that were very different, right? That's just to say that I'm inheriting something, right? I'm inheriting something that Band-Aids have been put on, and they've, lick 'em, stick 'em, bubble gum, so to speak, to keep it kind of held together. So anyway, through my public involvement in this project, this is the concept that you would have seen. This is the concept that circulated in the public sphere, right? So that began as 44 units between 505 and 509 Ray Street. In that conception of the project, we were totally preserving 505. We had done enough structural due diligence to feel that that was possible, but it wasn't until much later that we learned that that we thought that to be a risky proposition. And the 505 building is contemplated as being a totally new design for reasons I'll get into later. As you can see, this involves a large drive aisle between the buildings. Obviously, there's no 507 there, so that's how we chose to utilize that space. But harkening back to what the streetscape used to be, that was a continuous facade, right? There wouldn't have been a large drive aisle in between, and To quote the Historic Preservation Commission from our meeting in December, a giant hole on the 500 block of Ray Street. So the 505 building ultimately became financially infeasible due to the inefficiency of leverage resources. It is a very expensive building to build, and our design could only get 10 units in the building with the constraints of the zoning code. So those economics just don't work really well, whether it's workforce housing and even in market rate housing. I'm sure that would push the envelope on what is possible, especially as new construction. So the further we got into due diligence on this concept, as we started to look at the soil, the preservation work, the foundation work, it made the preservation of the Hearn totally prohibitive in our professional opinion, and the opinion of the design and construction and structural teams that were part of the development. So when I outlined that timeline earlier of how we got here, that is where the pivot occurred, that we then went back to MHT saying, hey, we want to raise these structures. So after all of that, we removed 505 from the development plan entirely. We would love to preserve that building, but the current contemplation, we actually cannot financially support it. So it also led to us deciding to do the Hearn building, keeping the facade and building a totally new structure connected to that facade. So we started one way, we ended up with another. So next slide, please. And that's just a reiteration of everything I just said. So next slide. So we started one way, it's evolved. Where we were before the meeting in December, before the HPC, was, all right, we're going to preserve the facade, we're going to build a new Hearn building. That is what we intend to do. And to understand what it would look like to build a new Hearn building, or even preserve what is there, I want to run through the history of the structural analysis that we've either been party to or that we have paid for ourselves. So May 30th of 2017, John D. Hines and Associates, JDH, they were retained by Stan Kaiser to perform a subsurface and geotechnical analysis of the Hearn. An important framing, right? Stan Kaiser hired a structural engineer, a civil engineering firm to do a structural analysis, subsurface soil analysis, and geotechnical analysis in order to preserve the building. That was his agenda, right? So that analysis, first off, at least from what I can gather, no loading information for the exterior walls was made available to Hines for their analysis, right? That report might exist, I just don't have it in my possession. But ultimately, they deemed the conditions of the soil were very poor with compressive organic silt materials encountered in the 3 borings that they tested. So ultimately what they found is the soil is very wet, it's very sedimentitious, it's more or less like sandy, right? So that's obviously a compromised structural condition if you want to put up a building or rehab a building that is in place. The report also called for new soil as floor slab support for the ground supported slabs. So what that would mean is that slab we looked at earlier, you would be putting in new soil underneath that, and that is 5 or 6 feet underground, right? JDH ultimately recommended that all the new bearing elements would need to be supported by deep foundations, right? So any new point of bearing load on the building, you are putting in a pile to support that load. So ultimately, what they concluded was that the soil was compromised and the structural integrity of the building at that time was compromised. It is unclear to me if Stan Kaiser went any further on the necessary structural analysis to even support his initial building design. As far as I can tell, he received conceptual approval on his designs. I'm going to, pardon my ignorance here, I don't know ultimately how far he got in the building approval process. But based off the documentation I have, he got conceptually approved. Next slide, please. So in February of 2023, we retained Becker Morgan Group to prepare a structural survey and site visit on the 505 building specifically. That I'm going to make this very short, but ultimately they determined that that building is a mess. It was the roof, it was the floor systems, it was the foundations. The building is actually racking, so you can see it from, if you look at the building straight on and look at 505 and 503 Ray Street, the building is basically doing this. It's pulling away from the shared wall. The framing had extensive water damage, insect damage, and the third floor framing ultimately didn't meet current code. So the vast majority of the brick as well would require a replacement. I don't know if you all have been in that building, but you go inside and the brick is actually just totally eroded, right? You know, trust me, I love a historic building, but the few times I've been in there, I've gotten the heebie-jeebies, and I refuse to go to the third floor. Ultimately, it is just very much unsound. So ultimately, it was Becker Morgan's opinion that with the state of that building, it was not suitable for reuse based on the existing conditions. They thought it was more prudent that you would just knock the building down, build a new one. We also entertained preserving the facade, but then building a new building off of the facade in light of what they found. February of 2025, we retained ECS at Mid-Atlantic. They're I believe they're a national operation that does geotechnical reports, phase 1, phase 2, HUD Part 58, environmental analyses. They determined that we have petroleum impacted soil levels that exceed the applicable cleanup standard. So we are going to have to do a phase 2 report to ultimately determine what level of remediation is required on the soils, right? So first you've got sandy soil that's not structurally sound, that cannot hold up a building that we're trying to build, and you've got soils that have oil amongst potentially other chemicals in it. You know, that scope of remediation could be very small. We could be talking about a very small pocket of oils, or we could be talking about, you know, a large-scale movement of the existing earth that is there. So next slide, please. So jump to February of 2025. We at Becker Morgan review. It was kind of a two-part approach, but ultimately they reviewed what JDH had prepared. So that, like I said, that was the engineer hired by Stan Kaiser, and then Becker Morgan did their own analysis of what was on site. And they engaged with JDH directly to try to understand what was the soil bearing capacity based off their conclusions of the geotechnical analysis they did in 2017. And JDH prescribed that the allowable, the capacity that is reasonable to assume was about 1,000 pounds per square foot. So what JDH also concluded in tandem with Becker Morgan was that any additional load on the structure would require additional capacity. So that's pilings, that's, you know, extending the foundations, that's inputting new earth underneath the slab. So it would be a lot of rigmarole to firm up what is there, basically. That was the conclusion that was made. So 1,000 pounds per square foot of soil load capacity, for those of you who are, you know, laymen to civil and structural engineering, right? That's basically enough to put up a single family house without any risk of, you know, lack of structural integrity, soil capacity, that sort of thing. You could put up like a small detached garage, you could put up a greenhouse, but it is by no means sufficient for a multifamily building. And let me caveat that that is the conditions on site now, right? I'm not saying that it couldn't be enhanced. I'm not saying that it couldn't be torn down and improved. But either way you go in this scenario, you have got dirt that cannot support a multifamily use without either really radical interventions for structural engineering to work around the existing structure, or what we are proposing, which is to just demolish everything, come in with new soils, come in with new pilings, and build a totally new building, right? To put it in perspective for the other projects that we build, so just as a quick aside, so we build workforce and attainable housing all across Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia. We've built, we've closed on financing on 28 projects. I believe we've built 24. I think it's around $350 million in total development costs that we've overseen. And in two of our most recent new construction projects, the soil bearing capacity was 3,000 pounds per square foot and 4,000 pounds per square foot, right? So we are talking about a scenario where to meet even building code, which would be around 2,500 per square foot, we're taking significant effort to reinforce the earth that is there, right? Next slide, please. So I apologize for the small font, but you know, my dog and pony show here is saying that it doesn't work as is, right? It either needs to be reinforced, and that would involve digging out the soil underneath the slab or tearing up the slab or putting in new pilings, working around the steel that is there. You know, the footers are woefully insufficient for what we'd be trying to do. It would be a massive effort to preserve something that has already fallen down multiple times, that has already fallen apart from weather and just deferred maintenance. And that is why we arrive at our current concept, which is to just preserve the front of the Hearn and then demolish the remainder of that building and then demolish 505. So at the December meeting with the HPC, which again was in formal review, right? We have not submitted an application. We have not gotten official commentary. This is purely spitballing in the name of collaboration and working together to come up with a project that everyone can be happy with. The direction we got from the HPC, like I said before, was can you restore the streetscape? Can you bring that continuous facade back to the 500 block of Race Street? So fortunately, the engineering that we did on our old concept of the Hearn, dimensionally, we could just rotate 90 degrees. And that same depth of building worked. Now, obviously, we had to rotate everything. But where that takes us now is 33 residential units as opposed to the 34 that we had before. That gives us 5,000 square feet of commercial, retail, office use that fronts Race Street. That can be one 5,000 square foot bay. It can be chopped up. It can be half and half. It gives us a continuous facade along Race Street, and we would not have a drive aisle in this contemplation. I have talked to the pastor at Grace United Methodist Church. They have a board meeting tomorrow where they will broach the concept of us purchasing an easement through their parking lot in order to access parking in the back of the building. And we're at a point where, you know, the Maryland Historic Trust and Maryland DHCD have given their blessing for us to do what we want to do, which is to tear down these buildings and build something new, right? And we actually, you know, my boss Tom checked in with the Secretary's office only about a week ago, and they reaffirmed their continued support for the project. So, with that being said, next slide, please. This is where we are now, right? So what we are envisioning is filling the gap in Race Street. As you can see, the Hearn would be preserved. The facade of the Hearn would be preserved. It would be emulated with replica historic materials to keep that classic historic facade. And then, you know, to the right of it here is where there would be a totally new building that would abut the Hearn and would be a mix of historic elements, but then also new and more modern elements. And again, this is at the direction of the HPC, right? The historic code actually calls for, in the case of, for lack of a better term, reconstruction, is to not double down on the historic pattern of the streetscape. It is to do something that kind of does a fusion of what is contemporary while still honoring the historic character of the streetscape and the historic character of the historic district. So, Yale Brew Pub is not a tenant that we have in mind. We have no tenants lined up. This is purely for conceptual purposes. But I am curious to know what the archive is up to and what their business is. But one other detail I want to point out as well, if you look on the right side of the screen, this is a purely ornamental feature that would connect into 503 Race Street. When I spoke with Pastor Chris last week, I told him that part of our development plan would also include, obviously, any of the necessary structural reinforcement of what was the shared party wall between 503 and 505 as well. So I'm committing to that as part of our development plan, as ensuring that building is sound for One Mission Cambridge and then the church's activities in there. any questions while I've got the concept up?
Hearing none at this time, you can proceed.
All right, thank you. So next slide. We can breeze through these pretty quick, but this is just the floor plan for the proposed building. So I know it's not super legible, and I apologize, but down here, those are your retail bays. While they are demarcated with walls, I spoke to my architect. She said that it could be a continuous space, or it could be like 2 bays that share a door. This here would be the historic entryway of the Hearn, so it would open into that kind of classic demarcated, 2 doors and the glass and all that. And then in this case, we do have ground floor residential units as well. Those were recently brought back into the code. I believe it was this summer. And then in the right there, we do have a community space and kind of leasing area. That's just a requirement of the financing that we use. Next slide, please. So on the second floor, again, units that would be at the back of the building, but just noting that that commercial space would remain open below, so it's not a 1-story space, it would be a 2-story space. So the idea is that we want to honor the height of the Hearn building now. It's about 20-some feet. So next slide, please. And then this is the plan for the third and fourth floor. Like I said, it's 33 units in total. It's a mix of studios, 1- and 2-bedroom apartments. The 2 beds, I think we flirt with kind of around 900. Some of them are maybe around 1,000 square feet. The studios hover around 600 square feet. So next slide, please. So just kind of my concluding thoughts, and I'm welcome and want to hear your questions or comments as well. The preserving 505 and preserving 509 does nothing to solve the big gap between the buildings, right? If we were to pursue that plan and preserve what is there, we preserve historic structures, or we do some combination of new construction and demolition, that's great, but you're still going to have this huge gap in Ray Street. So one advantage, as I see it, to this new concept is that we are bridging that gap. We are, creating a new facade, but while it maintains a character that is consistent with many of the other properties in town, right? And the preservation of a facade with new construction behind it, or like new structural work, that's consistent with other current and past projects in the downtown as well. So we're at a point where, I think the hard part was going back to MHT and saying, hey, we want to tear down 2 contributing structures, right? And that took 1.5 years to talk to the right people and have the right meetings and get the right engagement, but to ultimately arrive at a point where they said, okay, you can tear this down, you can do what you have to do, right? In my professional opinion, and again, I'm not a structural engineer, I sometimes play one in the same way that I play a paralegal and an architect. I think the evidence is abundantly clear that, could you do further structural analysis? Yes. Do we need to do that? Absolutely, right? But I think with what I have in hand, the building as it is does not make sense to preserve, right? It just, the soil, the structural capacity, the footers, the lack of foundation, the water damage over time, it just doesn't make sense to save the Hearn. And look, I'm not a fan of tearing down historic buildings either, right? I'm also not a fan of tearing down historic buildings that my great-grandfather owned, right? I have a vested interest in doing what makes sense for this property, and I'm remiss to tear it down, but logically speaking, it doesn't make sense for it to stay up, right? It's just that simple.
Is that correct? That was your great-grandfather's?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah. So my great-grandfather, Ralph Foxwell, owned the building for 20 years. He owned Artwell's Home Furnishings.
Okay.
So he operated out of there through late 70s through the 90s, I believe. Yeah. So that's just to say that, if anyone wants to preserve that building, it's me, right? But it just doesn't make sense. So I think we've arrived to a juncture where this concept, and if you could jump back to the rendering, please, that'd be great. Thank you. So I think we're at a juncture where this concept is going to be the best way to satisfy the goals of everyone involved, right? I am operating off of the direction of the HPC, also informally, right? I still have to submit. I still have to pay my architect to do more work to do a design that satisfies them. I will have to go back to the Planning Commission. So there's still plenty of work before me, but I think this is getting there, right? I think this is the solution for a lot of reasons. I think it's a life safety thing. I think it's a, historic streetscape thing. It's, raising blighted structures. Ultimately, we're providing workforce housing. And fundamentally, it's spurring economic development on the 500 block of Race Street, right? We have the potential to bring online 5,000 square feet of what could be Class A office, retail, commercial space and drive economic development downtown, right? And from the timeline that I outlined earlier, you can see that I've been involved in this thing for a long time, and it has absolutely felt like I've been spinning my wheels, right? There are definitely, I'm going to be totally honest, it is a tough project, but we're still in it because we see how important it is to the city of Cambridge and to the revitalization of the downtown, right? So I guess if I can ask anything in the here and now, just as a developer talking to a bunch of commissioners, is that can we just work together to make this thing happen, right? I've been involved for a long time. We can accelerate very quickly through this thing. I still have a lot to do before me, but I want to proceed in good faith and I want to have everyone's buy-in. And I think this could be a really special thing, but we have to get there. So that is where I'm at ultimately. I think I'll open the floor to all of you for any questions about the design, the concept, the history, the time that I toured the building 7 years ago and tripped on a pebble, anything you want to know, So.
Thank you. We'll start with Ward 5. If you have anything.
I'm not in a second. I'm just processing everything.
Ward 3.
Very candidly, I would like to have a better sense of the concept of workforce housing.
Sure.
I am certainly a proponent of providing quality living space, particularly in our downtown core. But historically, we have obviously endured the ramifications of concentrated poverty.
Sure.
And we have suffered greatly. Partially, the city has not done enough to manage the, abundance of poverty that we deal with. I'm just curious, is this a mixed income? I mean, it's funny how in some places, people, market rate is like a vulgar term, and it's not. I think the amenities in these units, are there amenities that, I can have my own laundry facilities? I mean, can I have those things that make a home a complete home? My residence. I don't have to share certain things. I think the amenities of whatever type of residential composition is constructed there, they should be there. It would be fantastic to see a nursing tech individual who has a job at one of our local rehab facilities. It'd be great if there was a viable place there, but I don't want to fall into the traps and pitfalls and social problems, injustices to the residents by over-concentrating, by continuing to over-concentrate our downtown core with a destitute, poverty-stricken condition. I mean, if workforce housing means, I'm a tech in a mechanic shop and, I'm paying my rent, okay, everybody's got to have a place to get that start. But looking at some of our other densely populated, economically restricted places, and again, largely fault of the city. We haven't managed that well, and I think it would be to our detriment to further concentrate downtown, with a completely subsidized situation.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the question. I mean, so I want to paint a distinction here. The subsidy exists in what I do through the low-income housing tax credit program, and in the simplest terms, it is a dollar-for-dollar exchange of equity investment to keep the units affordable. So when I say that, when I develop my project, I earn a basis that is eligible for the sale of tax credits, right? Those tax credits are facilitated by Maryland CDA as part of Maryland DHCD. They are sold on the secondary market. So part of my job, when I'm not pretending to be a paralegal or pretending to be a structural engineer, is pretending to be a real estate finance guy, right? And I engage with what is called an equity syndicator, and then they go find investors for those credits. So what that is to say, number one, what we build is an institutional grade asset, right? So the investors in our projects are JP Morgan, Bank of America, Discover Bank, right? They invest in these projects to offset their tax burden. So when you're dealing with properties of this level of scale and sophistication, they do their due diligence, right? So to your question about the units, it's washer, dryer, in unit, microwave, range, fridge. This is all Energy Star. We will probably be NGBS certified. We receive loans from Maryland DHCD. The terms of these loans are 17, sometimes 40 years. They want to protect their investment as well, right? With what we build to such an extreme energy rating standard, an extreme design standard, because all the parties want to ensure that this thing is still going to be standing in 15, 20, 30, 40 years if nothing were to be done to it, right? So that being said, the income restriction piece. This is subsidized in the sense that there is a federal low-income housing tax credit that funds the development, right? But the residents are not receiving a subsidy for living there, right? There is an income restriction in that they cannot make more than a certain amount of money, but they have to pay their rent on the 1st or the 5th or the 10th of every month, right? There are some financing programs where we might elect to build, units for persons with disabilities. That could come with a subsidy, but that person has to have a recognized disability to live in that unit, right? But by and large, the folks that would be living in this building would be earning somewhere between, 60 to 80% of the area median income, right? The 4-person AMI in Cambridge for 2025 is $87,000 a year. So to put that in perspective, like if a family of 4 were to live in this building, right, and live in one of the 2-bedroom units, they could earn up to about $74,000 a year, right? A single parent and a child or a couple that's moving to town, they could earn up to about $60,000 a year. So what does $60,000 a year in income look like in Dorchester County or the city of Cambridge for, let's say, one person works and one person is going back to school, or they both work, or what have you, right? So the fiscal year 24-25 salary scale for an educator in Dorchester County starts at $53,000, right? The starting salary for a cop in the city of Cambridge after they've completed the academy is $56,000.
That's still the case?
No, that's changed now.
Well, good for your officers. But so in my research, looking at Indeed and GovSalaries.com, the median salary for a city of Cambridge employee was around $50,000, right? Based off Glassdoor and Indeed data, the average pay for somebody who works at a local restaurant or a local bakery is around $45,000 a year, right? Again, I'm just a guy who Googled some stuff for this presentation, but we do market studies where we validate this kind of thing, right? what I'm ultimately saying is that this is meeting the market, right? This is meeting your workforce in the city of Cambridge. And while it comes with an income restriction, as a resident of one of these buildings, once you move in, you only have to qualify one time, right? So if you can meet the mark when you move in, as long as you don't move, you continue to benefit from the security of that restricted rent, right? So you think about the promise of improving your economic station and improving your, ability to save and to go eventually buy a house or buy a car or do all the things that everybody wants to do. One of the beauties of the LIHTC program is that it allows for that because it gives a place where they have the stability of rent to then continue to drive, economic betterment and fulfill their goals, So that's kind of the sense of things there. I mean, do you have any further questions on?
So there's zero diversity of unit differentiation. All of the units are identical as far as composition and content, and there's no way to, some might have maybe some, if I went in and looked at 3 different models, and
Sure.
well, Frank, this one, the rent's a little higher, and this one's right here in the middle, and this is our most moderate rent base.
Sure.
There's no differentiation.
No, there's no stratification between. So all the units are built the same way. They're fitted the same way, right? So the rent for an efficiency for a 1-bedroom, for a 2-bedroom is the same. Now, granted, those rents go up over time. It's all the tides rise together, right? Because the rent is driven by the area median income. So as Cambridge becomes more prosperous, that AMI restriction also goes up, right? So the ceiling with which somebody can live in that property goes up, which means more people become eligible for that property. But ultimately, the units are all outfitted the same way. The rent is uniform, and the rent growth is dictated ultimately by the state and by the income limits set by HUD. Now again, no subsidy present. People still have to pay their rent, but there is a cap on what the rent can be year over year. But that rent grows as your economy grows, right?
Would it be impossible to introduce a concept of some modest stratification, alter a few of the units, create some options, some choice, something for the market to say, you know what, I'd like to have that unit, and the different units are more better serve different households?
Well, the challenges you run into, you just run into a fair housing concern at that point, right? Like you've got to offer, at least through our program, the units have to have a similar program, right? But what you're pointing to is more about an income stratification of allowing folks at different income levels to. Is that ultimately what you're asking and pointing to? Is just having
I think that would be that would make for a healthy,
Sure.
integrated community to have
Yeah.
that stratification and to have that mixed income contribution
Sure.
in a residential, facility constructed of that magnitude.
Yeah.
33 units. I think that would be a healthy thing.
Yeah, it's something I've explored in my underwriting. The challenge is when I take a unit out of the affordable program, I don't get tax credits on that unit, right? I can't sell those to the investor. I can't get an equity investment. So there's an economic proposition there. But it's something I've explored. It's something I'm open to, right? I think you're very correct. And unfortunately, you want to have a little bit more stratification where you get to maybe 100% of AMI or 120% of AMI so that folks can kind of graduate up through that tier.
Some units. Sure.
Yeah, for some units, yeah. No promises in the here and now, but it's something that I've entertained in the past and can continue to look at,
No further questions now.
Thank you. Ward 2?
All right, sorry I was late. I had an event at the school this evening, but thank you for coming. I think definitely from what I caught of your presentation, it definitely provides some additional context for me. As you mentioned, you've been involved for a little while now. I am really interested, I know you talked about the structural analysis that took place May the 30th, 2017. You spoke about Becker Morgan Group also doing an analysis on February the 13th of 2023. And so my question before I get into my comments is, during that process, did Green Street Housing present to previous councils in regarding the outcome or results that you received from these analyses?
Yes. Now, it wasn't the same, like, 3 slides of this is the structural analysis, but in my past appearances in the various bodies in Cambridge, you know, that pivot occurred for a reason. Like, we decided that we wanted to raise these structures because of what we found. And I feel like I alluded to that in the past.
Okay.
So
that was the first question. And the other, pretty much what I had in reference to, you know, all of this is that, again, as I can't even say a new council because it's been a year now, but really having now the contextual understanding of what you've presented here today. On December the 22nd, when we were having the conversation for the resolution 2516, I am of the same mindset that if we can preserve our historic buildings, let's do so. I think to the evidence you've actually provided here today, there's been analysis and reports that speak contrary to. I am also of the same mindset that as a commissioner, you know, you actually sharing this information definitely allows for the public to engage. I think that the understanding that you've also presented to previous councils, I think that there's this notion out that I as a commissioner or this current body can actually stop this project. I don't have that understanding that it could possibly happen. I cannot see that this has been a conversation since 2017, and then I can't imagine that the current council would say, oh, we want to absolutely stop this project. Of course, individuals will have their concerns. Now, I do have to say, in what has been shared in terms of the concentration of poverty, right? Like, I understand what you've just shared in terms of the income restriction, the tax credits, and everything with this particular project, right? And I also understand my colleagues' perspective of the concentration of poverty. But I do want to make mention for public consumption is that with this particular project, the entirety of Ray Street is not also restricted, income restricted. So in the neighborhood itself, you're going to have the diversification of units, where in which I'll just say, I know my colleague Commissioner Roach has shared insight for me, I forget the author's name, just in regarding the work around diversifying neighborhoods by income limits and things like that, to ensure that individuals that may have experienced poverty or experienced financial struggle, they have some allies to gain insight from to improve their lives, right? And so I think when I think about the project and what you all are trying to bring to Ray Street, it definitely affords an opportunity for individuals that may not be able to afford some of the other housing on Ray Street to live in a very robust, amazing neighborhood in the city of Cambridge. And so again, I thank you for coming and presenting tonight, and I definitely think that with the information you provided, I'm certainly of the mindset that I want to work collaboratively with Green Street Housing and my colleagues to support or come up with what is needed. I definitely believe, I'm just going to say this also for the record, we need to have more public meetings, because we have a lot of people that can't come on a Monday night at 6 o'clock to a council meeting. Of course, they can engage through town hall streams and or reach out to you directly, but I definitely believe that there is other people in the public that has their insights to this process or this particular project, and I definitely believe you providing your information for them to reach out to you directly. I will say that I've had community members that have sent emails, and I will be honest, I've deferred to our staff because I do believe the staff has the expertise to help move this where it needs to be moved. But I appreciate Green Street for even engaging this. In my final comment, I do want to say former Secretary Kenneth Holtz, his whole envision for this project was workforce development housing. To Commissioner Stout's point of view, I think that definitely needs to be additional insight given to, you gave some examples of workforce development housing, but I think to clarify, additional information could be provided in terms of the difference of kind of what you shared tonight, workforce housing and subsidized housing. Because for whatever reason, sometimes subsidized housing, it gets a bad connotation or, narrative involved in that. And I guess my last question for you is, with this particular project, will there be a management company on site that will help to facilitate the project?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we deal with institutional grade investment. They want to ensure that the property is managed. It's also a requirement of Maryland DHCD. You have to have a property manager. So there will be a property management presence on site. I've got a whole operating budget, obviously, that the building has to operate under. Commissioner Louis Cisco, to your point about the difference between subsidized housing and what I do, it is a semantic challenge, right? This is something we run into in a lot of municipalities. People have embraced attainable housing as a means of differentiating and maybe getting away from a stigma. But for lack of a better term, subsidized housing would be a property that has full subsidy for the rents, so that a resident is going to pay no more than 30% of their income, whatever that income is, and then the rest of the rent is basically paid by the government, right? That is subsidized housing. So colloquially, what might be called like Section 8, right? That is subsidized housing, right? This project has a financing subsidy by way of the tax credits, but like I said before, the residents have to pay their rent every month, right? They have to meet strict income requirements to live in the property. It's actually really hard to live in a LIHTC property. I'm just putting it out there, right? To the question about the incomes and that sort of thing, like I said earlier, the average income would be around 60 to 80% of AMI. That 80% AMI is what is kind of capturing the market, for lack of a better term, right? So earlier I talked about, a couple earning $60,000. The four-person 100% AMI for Dorchester County in 2025 was $87,000 a year, right? So you're flirting with the average, right? We're already, for lack of a better term, we're meeting the market, right? We're not meeting the luxury market. I'm not going to pretend that I am doing that, right? But the population that I am trying to serve are the people that are starting out with a new job in the city, or it's a teacher's assistant, or it's a first-year teacher, or it's like that is the group that we are ultimately going to cater to. But you also have to consider the other end of the spectrum, right? This is a family property, but that means it can also accept seniors, right? We can take people that are on a fixed income. We can take seniors that want to live downtown. The building is going to have an elevator, right? These are people that are going to want to go to Simmons so that they don't have to get in a car or they don't have to call DCS to pick them up, right? So we can serve that portion of the population as well. Commissioner Cisco, to your point, I'm happy to do public meetings as they make sense. Obviously the path before me is going to be going to the HPC and then probably to the Planning Commission and the planning process from there. But for the most part, I've been an open book about this project. So to the extent that there are constituents who have questions, to the extent that there are people that want to live in the building and they want to get on the wait list that I don't have yet, you can pass along my contact information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Ward 1.
Chase, thanks for coming tonight.
Yeah.
Few questions. I guess I'm trying to understand our role as city council with this decision. We did the resolution in December, kind of stating our desire that you kind of work within the envelope of the buildings and not tear down 505 and tear down the back of the Hearn building. But that was just a resolution, kind of more advisory, directed toward HPC.
Of course.
You said it goes to HPC, then planning. Does it come back to us for any ruling or decision?
I'm here on good faith. I'm
seeing Dean say no.
Yeah.
I'm a good override planning director. Currently, the process doesn't include coming back for
final sign off by city council. They're already obligated to work within the system that you've established through the comprehensive plan and through the permitting process.
I'm here because this project is important. I'm here because this project is, like, I want you all involved. I want your input. Like, we want to move forward in good faith and integrity and do what is right for everybody in Cambridge.
Right.
So this is kind of FYI, kind of, it kind of lives in that space. Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify so I understood what our role in this. I appreciate you coming here tonight, and this has been informative. I guess a few questions. Who owns 505 Ray Street now?
So Neighborhood Partners owns 505, 507, and 509. They own all three parcels. Yep. Okay. So they took possession of all those parcels when the prior developer, for lack of a better term, they repossessed the property based off the lending arrangement they have.
The 507 was Historic Cambridge Inc. at one point in time owned it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, but this Neighborhood Good Partners, NGP or whatever, has them all now.
Yep.
Okay. Why does new construction didn't work for your budget for 505, but essentially you're doing new construction now? Why does it work now? It didn't work before.
It's a scale, right? It's 33 units as opposed to 10, fundamentally. It's also, with the programs that I work in and the relative footprint of that building, and that's why I'm a really big fan of this proposition too, right? Because it's actually like better utilizing the footprint, and it does create a back space where there's not only a parking lot, but there could be other future development potential as well, right? I mean, that lot is incredibly deep, right?
Incredibly deep.
Yeah. So there's the potential for down the road, like, do we park our residents? But then there's a totally other use that could happen. Back there is the creation of another street, right? Historically, there was a street there is at least a street papered that runs from Pine Street and would more or less cut through that lot. And something we also entertained is what does it look like to bring that street back and create more streetscape, So, this development plan would allow for some flexibility in that domain.
Are you positive about receiving the easement from the church? Is that critical?
It would be necessary to access our parking lot, right? But my reading of the code at this time is that we don't actually have a parking requirement for the building. But we want to park it adequately for the users of the building.
It's nice for your prospects or future
tenants. Of course, and I mean, marketing a property that doesn't have parking is an uphill battle, you know what I mean? So, but yes, whether it's through the church or, I will also be reaching out to the owner of the warehouse behind the Hearn to see if we can either, purchase a strip of their parcel or a similar easement arrangement as well. Okay. Fundamentally, if we can't park it in this design, we will have to go back to having a drive aisle to access our parking, right?
Right.
That being said, what you could imagine is that we're still building a new building, but maybe it's going deeper and there's a drive aisle right here, right? So we will have to park a building in some capacity, but I would really like to do it through an easement to maintain, this design concept.
Great. I like the idea of no gap. I never really buy into that concept. When you design a new building, you're supposed to make it look more contemporary. I know that's kind of the way that the attitude is amongst historic preservationists. So you can tell the difference between the old building and the new building, but so be it. On the qualifications for the residents, is that AMI for the city of Cambridge or Dorchester County? Or?
Dorchester County. Yeah, the AMI isn't localized by city.
Okay, so it's Dorchester.
It's for the county as a whole. Yeah.
Okay, so that probably makes a little bit higher number.
It does. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and actually, the AMI, the four-person AMI for Dorchester County grew by about $10,000 per year from 24 to 25. It is projected to do something similar this year. So, bear in mind, I am restricted by AMI. The higher the AMI is, the higher the income cap for the residents, the more capture we can achieve of the workforce.
Can you have income less than 60%, or you have to be in that band of 60 to 80?
No, so you could earn less than 60. It's an up to, right?
But you got to meet some kind of. I mean, like usually it's your income's supposed to be 3 times the rent.
We do. We generally do. We do 3. Yeah, we generally do 3 times rent. But yeah, we have underwriting standards for our residents, and that's a whole, like, there is a whole sub-industry that is just compliance and the low-income housing tax credit world. But there's a pretty rigorous application process and criteria. Obviously, due to the nature of this kind of housing, they want to suss out people who are trying to, for lack of a better term, like cook the books and
Right.
like, I only make $30,000 a year, but they like don't report their side business where they make $45,000 more a year, right? So there's a lot of scrutiny in the residents' ability to live in these properties.
Yeah, so so your rents are going to be based on people. You want to achieve the highest rents possible
Sure.
within that band.
Yeah.
So it seems like it'd be tough for someone that makes less than 60% of AMI to qualify.
It kind of depends, right? Because you think about it, what is 60% of AMI in a market like the city of Cambridge versus, like, let's say PG County, right? It might be something that it's more prohibitive there, but it's more attainable here, right? So you're thinking about the, I guess it would be the denominator in this case of, like what ultimately would be achievable, right? Now, but to your point about capture, we might choose to put like a rent advantage on the band, right? So we have to hire a market analyst who basically says this is what you can achieve based off the market. These reports look at local demographics, they look at employment data, they look at growth trends. Like, it's a very comprehensive thing, and it is kind of expensive, and I have to do it all the time, but that's a whole other aside, right? But the state is going to require those reports, right? So that is part of our underwriting process. But ultimately what that report does is it tells us the rent that is achievable. So to your point, yes, we want to achieve the highest possible rent, but we also have to underwrite in a way that satisfies the market. And additionally, we have thresholds that we have to meet for Maryland DHCD, right? Like I said earlier, Maryland DHCD is underwriting an investment, for lack of a better term. So they want to make sure that the necessary market capture is there. They want to make sure that the necessary thresholds are met. And those standards are pretty rigorous as well.
Okay. Just a couple questions. We still have a long night ahead of us.
Yeah.
Once you get all your approvals, is the capital stack in place, and are you
Yes.
ready to start construction?
So our capital stack, all of our funds from Maryland DHCD are committed at this time, right? That was part of the conversation with the secretary. Those resources are still there for us. We're obviously subject to CDA underwriting ultimately, but everything that we have awarded is within the guidelines of what is allowable. Our multifamily capital fund award is still active. The only thing we have left to do is to find a tax credit equity syndicator. That is ultimately the purchaser of the tax credits,
Right.
but that is not like a 2-year process. That can be as little as like a 3-month process. My intent is that we are going through the design timeline locally. We are running that in tandem with the process with Maryland CDA and their construction review, because, look, trust me, I want to close on this financing just as desperately as everybody else to start construction, right?
Right.
But the intent is that we're going to move as expeditiously as possible to do so.
Okay. I didn't know if these grants or things scale based on a reduction in size of the project, but everything's in place for what you want to do here.
Yeah, so there's a scale in the sense of not that multifamily capital fund award, but like some of the other financing resources. It's on a per unit basis, so I am actually losing some ability there.
Okay.
But the project is still very much financially viable.
And then once you start, a year and a half, something like that? Before you deliver?
13 months, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. No other questions?
Thank you, Ward 1. We'll go back to Ward 5.
Yep, thank you, and thank you for that. That's nice that you got rid of that missing tooth, as the HPC calls it. I have an inordinate amount of comments and things that I will spare you from, because I really had been hoping. I was on the prior council,
Sure.
and I had crafted a letter to just have a meeting with you. I was flatly rejected, I think, at the time. I don't know why, because the letter was really to have Green Street, the city, and the Department of Housing come together, and actually Main Street, a lot of the parties and a lot of the concerns that Ms. Lewis-Cisco is hearing, really just hash this thing out.
Sure.
So it's incredibly unfortunate that we're at a point in time where you feel rushed and I feel rushed, and this council feels completely unknowing of what has transpired to this point, because it didn't have to be that way. So I just want to clear the air with that. My first real issue with this, just to summarize it quickly, is that, to my knowledge, most workforce housing is placed in places with a high amount of jobs and a low quantity of housing. We actually have the inverse of that.
Sure.
So the project right away is suspect to me. So then I looked into, well, why would you want to build it here, other than the fact that Mr. Holt was doing everything in his power to get this project done. And I appreciate you coming to the table to help him, and I think you really are doing it with the tools that you've been provided. There's no doubt about it. That said, my understanding is really the real gain of this project is for your institutional investors. It's a heck of a deal for them. The higher the subsidy, the more of the tax credit, so it actually makes the project better, which would explain why instead of just doing like 40%, it certainly makes financial sense to do 100% subsidy. Whereas Commissioner Stout's point, why wouldn't we just look at the fact that that rent study, which is the only thing that came to council, by the way, was the rent study, from what I understand. It was do the rents qualify as affordable? And the fact is that the rents that are being charged actually do exist within a market rate scenario in Cambridge, which is another odd question I had, why you would actually charge rents that are already available in the private market. So anyway, those are all things I need help understanding, other than the fact that the financial stack, from what I understand, is incredibly lucrative because of the fact, not just for Green Street, but for the institutional investors that invest in this. They have a below market guaranteed rate loan through Neighborhood Partners. There's developer fees that go along with this that are nice. And then, why is the project so big? I don't know the exact number of current rental units we have in downtown Cambridge, but this project will effectively dwarf the number of available units in downtown Cambridge. My concern there is that it would depress actually the developers on the private side that are actually trying to attract market rate tenants and need that as a base for their private market financing. They're not getting the LIHTC funding, which actually wants to participate in the funding and is guaranteed and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, we are in a low-income housing census tract. It's important to recognize we don't have an abundance of jobs, which a place that would have an abundance of jobs, you want to pull a project like this in. And then really my end game is just, why so big? Why can't we just actually scale this thing back? And why can't we just have a percentage of not 100% market rate? I honestly accept the need for maybe about 40% of the subsidized units, but why can't we just have a mix where, to Commissioner Stout's point, you could have some market rate, because we have a demand for market rate rental housing in this community, without a doubt. And I was just hoping that if DHCT would come to the table, Green Street with all of their resources, and the city, whatever we could do to expedite this process and make it far less cumbersome than it's been for you, we come up with a project that is a healthy mix of market rate, subsidy, historic preservation, and of a scale that doesn't dwarf other private market investments that are happening in our downtown. Incremental development is healthy. If the planning, I know that the planning commission director is familiar with that. Local financing is another healthy thing that we want. We don't want J.P. Morgan being the primary financer for stuff down. Their numbers work differently than everyone else, and there's just a lot there. But I'm a huge fan of your ability to do the project. I'm a huge fan of what you're trying to do from a visual standpoint. But again, and I have no horse in this race. I'm just a city council. All I saw was a rent study that I felt justified that the rents being charged already exist in the city. And then I didn't see something that said there's an abundant need for workforce housing and an abundance of jobs for people that can't afford housing here. But I think this project could be, instead of a good project for just Green Street and the institutional investors, and I'm not saying it's a great project for you because I know it's hard, but a real great project for the downtown, scaled properly, and actually in a mix of units that actually would contribute much more to the vibrancy of our downtown and wouldn't exclude anyone from living there. When my wife moved here, we had a hard time finding a market rate rental for her because they didn't exist. There's plenty of units that were of low quality and low rent throughout the city, but a quality market rate rental, and I have friends, and there's actually people that I would argue are in this audience that moved to Cambridge because they had a job, but they couldn't afford housing in Talbot County, and there wasn't workforce housing there. That would be somewhere that this project would be a slam dunk, but here we don't have the abundance of jobs. We have the abundance of housing. We just need quality housing, and I know you do quality work. I've seen the other work, but we have got to make this so that it is not exclusive to market rate or excludes market rate tenants. And as a commissioner, I would be willing to do anything in my power to help you realize that. And that's what I was trying to say. And I've had conversations with Jake Day, and I honestly felt like the impression I got was the city has to tell DHCD and Green Street what they want to see this project be, and then we'll make it happen. But I lost that opportunity when I had a council that I don't know why, and I will never know why, wouldn't even let me send a letter asking to come to the table, because that could have maybe had this property in play already.
Probably.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Commissioner Roach. I don't know why that meeting didn't occur, but I'm before you now in good faith. To the market rate component, to the blending of income structures, I have underwritten what that would look like. The loss of the tax credit equity doesn't make the project viable, unfortunately. You are dealing with a very expensive building.
At the scale you're trying to do it, though.
At the scale we're trying to do it.
You could rein the scale in, is my other point, and maybe make it work.
Maybe, but you have to remember, too, the basis you earn relative to the additional unit you build or the additional costs you have, that only raises so much, right? You have a dance between the leverage you achieve on the debt and the equity that you generate from the construction, right? There's a happy medium whether it's 30 units or whatever, with the resources that you have, something actually works. That being said, I am happy to entertain the concept of market rate units, right? You are pointing to more institutional legislative problems with the workforce housing program, right? That there is a cliff. It does exist,
I understand.
right? I understand what you're trying to do.
You're operating within a framework that isn't perfect.
Yeah, it's not a perfect framework, but it's the framework that I know, and I'm holding a hammer and I see a bunch of nails, right? But I'm not remiss, and I would welcome the opportunity to pick up a screwdriver and try a screw, right? What I'm saying is, we're willing to entertain it. My financing can only achieve so many things, but, with the backing of DHCD or, support locally, maybe that's something we can look at, right? I've had informal conversations about what it looks like to create, teacher housing, for lack of a better term, right? I mean, this project is already a crazy underwriting challenge. It is already nuts. I'm willing to make it more nuts, right?
I mean, to your credit, that's why the historic tax credits exist. That's why the LIHTC credits exist, to make projects like these feasible. Yeah. So why can't we can make it feasible? Let's do it, and for the so it's a much more well-rounded project. So let's make it happen so that we don't have these oddball complaints about a concentrated subsidy and lack of market rate and lack of mixed income and a project that maybe is of a scale that fits within the current need for downtown Cambridge. And I don't see anything wrong with that or that not being able to happen based on the research I did on the requirements for LIHTC. It's just that if you only keep it at 20 or 40%, you got to figure out how to make the rest of the project work. And I get that. It doesn't guarantee your rents, but if you do a great project, by all indication, you're not going to have any trouble filling it, and you're going to have people from the entire region living there, because that's happening already. And Brett, you can back me up if you want, but I mean, people are looking to move here that have full ability to pay market rate rents because they have jobs throughout the region and they can't afford to live, or there isn't sufficient quality apartments there for them. It would be a great project, and it would be a model project that we could make work somehow. I guarantee we can make it work. We just have to bring all the parties to the table and say, this is the project we want.
Sure. And I'm willing to entertain that endeavor and to have, continued conversations with you and the council about what those look like. Again, I can't make any guarantees. I have to do what is financially viable. I have to do what I can build. A few points of clarification too. So Neighborhood Partners, they are a fully third-party seller. When they sell the property, they are washing their hands of it, right? So there is no residual loan there. There is no what have you. To the tax credit environment right now, this is a frankly garbage time to try and get tax credit equity for a handful of different reasons and a lot of different economic indicators. A lot of the major investors are capping off their funds and their cycles, and while they're starting their new fund, given the state of the world, there's a lot of economic uncertainty. The corporate tax rate remains relatively low, and what that does is it puts downward pressure on the demand for tax credits, right? They have less tax liability to offset. So while I understand where you were getting at with the kind of good investment, it's actually a really tough time to price tax credit projects right now. This project, for example, from when I started to where it is now, has probably lost somewhere around $2.5 million of equity to make the project viable because of the changes in the market. So, in any event, it's not an easy time to sign up tax credit equity.
So I'm going to call the presentation at this time. Chase, definitely appreciate you spending time with us this afternoon. I would say that if there are additional questions, comments, or concerns related to the project, we are already an hour and a half into this one presentation. We definitely should probably schedule a work session and invite those key players to the table. And I just want to clarify, Commissioner Roach, the council voted not to send a letter as a council, but you were very much so empowered to send a letter individually as a commissioner. So I just want to clarify that we didn't tell you you couldn't send it. We just voted not to send it as a council. Again, Chase, thank you so much for the presentation. And if there are additional questions or comments, please let's maybe look at scheduling a work session or something to bring everybody to the table and talk about it at one time instead of hearing it now and then hearing it again and repeating and rehashing. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right, next on the agenda would be the consent agenda, items number 6. Chuck Davis, Director of Skilled Trades. I'm going to abbreviate instead of reading the full thing. Item number 7, Amanda Fenstermaker, Merge Community Manager for Cross Street Partners. Item number 8, Christina Wingate Spence, Executive Director of Main Street. And item number 9, Old City Hall update, followed with a council agenda report from the Special Projects Coordinator, Cheryl Hannon. Would there be a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Properly motioned and second. Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda does pass. Also, Commissioner Louis Cisco did join the meeting as well for the purpose of the record. Ordinances for first reading. Ordinance number 1261. Mr. City Attorney.
Ordinance number 1261, an ordinance of the Commissioners of Cambridge, Maryland, for the purposes of amending sections 1-2 and 1-15 of Chapter 1, General Provisions of the Code of the City of Cambridge, Maryland, regarding terms defined in the City Code and the City Council's Rules of Procedure, respectively, for clarity, consistency with current practice, and for more efficient administration of the city government, providing that the title of this ordinance shall be deemed a fair summary and generally relating to general provisions of the City Code.
Thank you, sir. Item number 11, ordinance number 1262. And again, these are just ordinances for first reading, so there will not be any discussion. Ordinance number 1262. Mr. City Attorney.
Ordinance number 1262, an ordinance of the Commissioners of Cambridge, Maryland, amending Chapter 4, Buildings and Housing of the Code of the City of Cambridge, Maryland, for the purpose of enacting a new Article 8 entitled Vacant Commercial Storefront Registration, providing for the registration of vacant commercial storefronts in the City of Cambridge, fees associated with such registration, and defining terms associated therewith,
providing that the title of this ordinance shall be deemed to bear some and generally relating to vacant commercial storefronts in the city of Cambridge.
Thank you again. This is followed with the council agenda report from Assistant City Manager Brandon Hessen. This is first reading, so there will not be any council discussion. Ordinances for second reading, there are none. Old business, there are none. New business, item number 12, Land Bank update. We will hear briefly from our housing programs manager, Mr. Ed Crosby. And I emphasize briefly because we have I'm not being funny, I'm being serious. We have a agenda report and we can read that, but we'll hear briefly from you at this time.
Good evening to everyone. Honorable Mayor LaJan Cephas Bay and the Commissioners of Cambridge. Just real quickly, the Housing Department is pleased to provide the Mayor and the Commissioners with an update on the work that has been done with the Land Bank consultant, Brian White, G Properties Innovation. As you're aware, Brian visited our city back on October 2025. Since that time, he has met with our legal counsel, code enforcement office, GIS, and planning departments. And based on those informational sessions, brainstorming meetings, he has been able to recommend parameters for how to optimally operate the land bank in the city. And from these engagements, the city staff have developed a land banking housing priority dashboard map for classifying and ranking parcels for their fitness and remediation, improvement, or redevelopment. A criterion, methodology, and process have been developed for appropriately identifying and assessing potential land bank inventory with a target property value of $30K and below. Brian has provided the city with a best practices analysis and overview of the existing land banks in the United States to identify those that are most successful in turning underutilized properties to productive use. Just to jump down a little bit now, we are ready now to begin laying some of the groundwork for communicating with residents, developers, contractors, and nonprofit organizations to understand their interests and concerns. City staff are committed to ensuring that the land bank progresses in a realistic way and that the community is sufficiently informed about what the land bank can and cannot do. Residents' input will inform how the land bank operates to ensure the land bank is aware of and is sensitive to community resident concerns and interests. And so Brian will be coming to the city in February, and there will be some community-based meetings that will be taking place. In the package, you'll see a projected timeline. The timeline is just that, a projection, and just to give us a framework to look at. What we'll do now is have Brian, if you could come online and go ahead and prepare to share your the slide deck. Dale, if the slide deck is ready.
Is he going to present his from his side, or do you want me to present here?
You can present from here, and I guess he can just tell you to advance it when he needs to. Brian, are you there? Okay.
Hey everybody.
Okay.
Good evening.
Can you all hear me and see me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I am mindful that this has been a long meeting so far and you guys have had a lot to digest. So I can skip through these slides relatively quickly. As Ed shared, we've done quite a bit of work on the land bank up to this point. And what I tried to do in this document was to summarize at a relatively high level what we have accomplished and what is kind of remaining for us in the next several weeks and months. So if we could skip to the next slide. This is just a quick reminder as far as kind of how we got here. So we got started working on this project in roughly August of this past year, and we've been working on and off with the city staff and stakeholders since that time period. And for those that are not familiar with our work, or the work generally speaking, oftentimes these land bank organizational projects can be a little bit iterative, because what you're doing in these projects is you're trying to identify and define what is both the problem you're addressing, but also what are some potential solutions that are available to you. So oftentimes the strategies that are available to you dictates the pace at which you're developing. And so I think a lot of what we've been doing these last several months is really helping to understand what are the issues on the ground, what are the statutory opportunities that the city might have available to it. What are some of the market-based realities that we should be cognizant of? And then also just really working with the city's staff and stakeholders to help them understand what a land bank is and what a land bank is not. We can go to the next slide. Here we're just sort of touching on some of the key activities. So we've gone through and looked at data from the city. We know that the comprehensive plan is currently in process, but we have had a chance to see some of the draft documents. We've analyzed the results of the Dorchester County tax sale over the last 10 years. As Ed mentioned, I was in town and I had a chance to go view some of the properties and to meet with some of the potential builders and developers that might want to work with the city. We also spent a lot of time evaluating various strategies and making sure that we could align what the land bank was going to be able to work on with what the law kind of allows it to work on. And lastly on this slide, we talked about the possibility of positioning the land bank as a potential receiver of property, which is a very formal role that is played by land banks in some cases where they can help the city to effectively steward properties that are not owned by the city or the land bank, but which the receiver steps in on behalf of an absent owner who is unwilling or unable to maintain their property. I think one of the things that I would note, just as far as some of the results, and I would share this maybe for the audience as well, most of the distressed properties that we've encountered in the city of Cambridge are privately owned. They are not owned by the city, and they are not necessarily easy to grab or to get control of through other, resources beyond or strategies beyond exercising municipal authority. There's also some challenges in the way property code enforcement operates, not challenges based on how it operates. The code enforcement department and activity is actually very robust and very assertive, but it's more about the legal framework and so forth. So one of the things that we typically encounter is a perception in the broader community that the blighted or distressed properties that people see are somehow with the responsibility of the city. And to some extent that is true because the city has a responsibility to make sure properties are maintained. But realistically, most of the property is actually privately owned. And so a big challenge is trying to figure out what are the legal ways that the city or its partners could get a hold of those properties. In terms of the tax sale in Dorchester County tends to operate with a very high rate of redemption and a very low rate of properties going to deed. So there is an active investor market in Dorchester County where people are buying and buying unpaid property tax liens and then having those liens redeemed by the property owners. So we're not seeing a large amount of turnover of the properties, but we are seeing intervention by tax investors that can sort of stymie the ability for someone else to step in and take over some of those properties. The last thing I would share is, for those that are trying to understand this, the land bank is designed or would be designed as an intermediary between the current owner and current use and condition of a property and its future use. So despite the name, the land bank is not like a savings bank where you deposit properties and let them sit for a long period of time. It's really designed as an intermediary where the land bank is acquiring parcels, getting them stabilized, and then conveying them back out to responsible developers who can put them to some sort of productive reuse. If we go to the next slide, please. The main pathways that a land bank is going to be able to acquire property through in Cambridge is, to a limited extent, there may be some tax sale acquisitions where the land bank goes into the tax sale and buys tax liens and then works to foreclose the liens on properties that are absent or where the owners are absent or not in the picture. The land bank is not going to be positioned to take property from people. It's not looking to displace people. It's not looking to step in front of active, functioning real estate development activity. It's not trying to compete with private developers who are actively engaged in doing constructive work. The tax sale would be more of a strategic, surgical activity where it goes into the tax sale and acquires a very specific piece of property. Receivership, I mentioned. We evaluated receivership, and I would put receivership relatively low on the list of potential strategies. One, because it is somewhat complicated and it's not something that a new organization is going to necessarily jump into right away. There's also legal restrictions on the role of the receiver that we can get into in more detail, but it is a strategy that the city, I think, in a very thoughtful way, put out there as a potential tool for the land bank, and I think the question for the land bank is to kind of grow into the ability to play that role constructively. There are going to be opportunities to acquire property directly from the city, where the city has pursued a property for a violation of some enforcement activity on codes primarily, and the owner is either foreclosed out of that property or just voluntarily gives the property up as opposed to fighting the city. It's a very common activity across the country where land banks essentially are at the receiving end of properties that come to the land bank via a legal action by the city. I think as what I would say on that particular point is I think as I've looked at the code enforcement activity of the city, I think the city does a really thorough job of trying to give owners the ability to voluntarily comply. So again, we're really seeing this in a situation where an owner is either not on the scene anywhere, maybe they died and there are no heirs, there's no one around to take care of that property, or the property was purchased by someone who is out of state, out of the area, they're not responding, they're not really taking responsibility. I guess the way I look at this is an owner who is not necessarily the most sympathetic as opposed to the little old lady that people oftentimes conjure up in their minds who is being affected by these issues. There is the opportunity for the land bank to purchase property directly. There's nothing that would restrict the land bank from purchasing property, and the land bank can receive property via donation from a private party or from the city or from anybody else. The land bank would be organized as a nonprofit organization, so it would be a standalone, independent organization in the city. The next slide, please. In our analysis, we sort of looked at three different models that we thought would be potential for Cambridge. One is where the land bank is positioned almost primarily or exclusively as an agent of the city, and it basically takes direction from the city, and the city is responsible for supporting it with properties and funds and so forth. Second option is the land bank is much more of an independent organization, but it coordinates closely with the city to identify which properties to acquire, hold, and develop. And then the third is where the land bank operates almost like an independent community development corporation and kind of does whatever it wants based on its own priorities and objectives. My recommendation would be more of the middle ground, which is that the land bank has to be able to operate independently with its own board of directors and its own strategic intention and purpose, but naturally that work would be closely coordinated with the city. There would be close communication, close cooperation, and really trying to make sure that the land bank is positioned in a way that it can support the work that the city is already doing, whether that's holding properties on behalf of development partners that would like to have that property held by the land bank as part of a formal land banking agreement, which is a case where you might hold property longer term, or just simply identifying properties that might be coming into the city's possession where the land bank can get prepared to take responsibility for those properties. There's also, as I mentioned, the role of the receivership, which would require the land bank to staff up in a way that allows it to play that role independent of the city. So again, there's different options out there for how land banks are organized and how they operate. Every state has a state statute that dictates what a land bank can do, and then local practice and the nature of the market kind of dictates what the land bank will do. And we're sort of suggesting this middle ground where the land bank is an independent but closely collaborative organization. So the next slide shows kind of just a general vision of what the land bank is or can be. It would be independent of the city, but would coordinate closely with the city and external stakeholders to identify properties to acquire, hold, and convey. It would operate with high levels of competency, transparency, and responsiveness to community input, and it would look to boost its capacity to serve as a receiver of property. And it may, this is another thing that we could talk about, is it may create a land trust or a land trust-like program that allows it to hold properties long-term on behalf of specific affordable housing developments or affordable housing goals. That is something that around the country land banks are forming or partnering with land trust. The reason why it's may is it's not necessary to create a land trust to achieve land trust-like outcomes, and we can get into that in more detail at some other point. Next slide, please. So there's some key assumptions behind our approach, and this is kind of what informs our recommendations. Number one is the land bank would acquire properties identified by the city and help the city identify which properties that the city should actually prioritize. Again, looking primarily at things like vacancy, market feasibility, strategic value to a development partner. We don't anticipate the land bank is going to be just going out willy-nilly looking for properties to acquire, but it's more like helping partners execute a very specific redevelopment strategy. The land bank can acquire properties directly, and one of the sources of tension that sometimes comes up with land banks, and I think this relates to your conversation you're having about market rate development, land banks are oftentimes positioned to create more affordable housing, but they operate in markets where there may not need to be as much of affordable housing as there is a need for market rate or mixed income housing. So one of the reasons why land banks will sometimes acquire properties that are market rate is for opportunistically creating revenue generation just to support the land bank's other work. So as you're going forward and thinking about how the land bank should operate, we anticipate there'll be an MOU between the city and the land bank, and that MOU can stipulate kind of the parameters of what the land bank's freedom and flexibility would be. But I would argue and recommend that there be the ability for the land bank to periodically acquire certain properties simply because it helps to support the mission of the land bank, and it may not necessarily contribute to some of the other goals, but it supports the bottom line. Third assumption is the city will provide seed money to launch the land bank. It will be the land bank will probably depend very heavily on the city, at least for the first couple of years. And it's very possible that the land bank may require some kind of continuing funding from the city on a forward-going basis. There is a misperception, I would say, where people try to position land banks to be self-sustaining and self-supporting. In 30 years of working land banks across the country, I haven't seen a single example where there is a land bank that is a self-supporting land bank. Probably the closest one I could think of is the land bank in the Twin Cities, which is much more of a strategic development partner that pursues tax credit deals, catalytic developments, large-scale developments. So it's a very different animal relative to most of the land banks, which are typically dealing with residential property, vacant lots, small commercial properties, and properties for which the market has sort of overlooked or passed them by, and there's a need to invest in those properties to get them back onto the tax rolls. So there is the opportunity, depending on how the portfolio of properties is positioned and what types of properties the land bank gets, to create less dependency. But I want to just make sure I am transparent with folks in saying that there's a very strong likelihood that the land bank will be depending in some way, shape, or form on the city or on other public support going forward. Assumption number 4 is that the land bank will be a responsible manager and steward of property, so that's just something that goes with the territory, and that the land bank will always be looking to get properties redeveloped in ways that advance the city's broader community economic development goals. So the way we see this is that on a regular basis, the land bank and the city are coordinating as far as what the city is trying to accomplish and how the land bank can help. Once those meetings have concluded, both parties kind of go off and do their own things, and they get back together and they touch base and they coordinate, and it's an ongoing coordination and collaboration between the two. If the city was to identify particular parcels that it wanted to have acquired for some sort of long-term development project, the land bank would hold those properties on behalf of the city if that was beneficial for the city. Similarly, if there was an organization like your Habitat or another nonprofit that wanted the land bank to hold properties as part of a development agreement, again, that's something that the land bank could do, but the land bank would typically run that proposal or that use by the city to make sure that whatever that proposed project was in accordance with the city's objectives. So we don't anticipate the land bank is going to be out freelancing and doing a lot of stuff that's not consistent with what the city is trying to accomplish. And then the last point I put on here is, we have a bias towards transparency and data-driven decision making. We also remind people that the land bank has to be sensitive to the market. And lastly, and most importantly, it has to be community-centered. So whether you position the land bank as a standalone entity that's based in a neighborhood storefront office or a church basement as a traditional nonprofit oftentimes gets started, or if you put it at City Hall, the land bank should be focused first and foremost on what does the community want to see happen and making sure the community understands what the land bank is trying to accomplish. And then at each turn in the process, the land bank strives to be as transparent with its development partners as well as its stakeholders as it can be. Next slide, please. So this just again sort of summarizes some of the activities. I will point out towards the bottom of the slide here, we have started to draft policies and procedures. We have started to draft a job description for a board of directors. We have a little bit of a placeholder brand identity that we just create because it's helpful to kind of envision what the land bank will do or look like and kind of have a mental image. So none of these things are cast in stone. These are all drafts, but what we're trying to focus on in our work right now is really getting us to the finish line of our work so we can hand off the land bank to a board of directors who can then start the work of hiring staff and going through those next steps. If we go to the next slide, Here we've sketched out some of the things that we need to still accomplish. So first one is to draft the IRS 1023, which is the application for nonprofit status. There is some registration and filing that has to be done with the state to make sure that the nonprofit has state sales and property tax exemption. We have to draft a staff plan and budget plan. I will say that we typically, when we're doing these projects, we're typically looking at staffing roles that include a director, an administrative function, and an operations staff person who is dealing with asset management and operational work, working with contractors and people outside the organization. And then there is a community-based role or an external-facing role that's dealing with the broader public, which could be nonprofit organizations, development partners, people at the city, people at foundations, and so forth. You don't have to have 4 staff, but you have to be aware that there are those 4 key functional roles, and somebody has to play those roles as a staff person. Where we oftentimes see new organizations struggle is primarily for budget reasons. Organizations try to skinny down the staff commitment and get by with 1 or 2 staff. And what I try to remind people is, if you have 1 staff, you have 1 person performing 4 functions. If you have 2 staff, you might be able to divide it across 2 staff. The functions don't go away. So what really becomes a stumbling block for new land banks is the first staff person is divided so thinly that they don't have the capacity to address all the operational details that need to go into the organization, and therefore it doesn't grow as quickly as it could. It doesn't achieve maturity as quickly as it could. So we typically recommend 4 staff roles as a starting point. It also depends on the size of the inventory. So if you have a very small inventory, you don't necessarily need all of the staff. But at a minimum, you probably are looking at least 2 staff. And we'll get into the staffing plan and the budget plan as we start to get into the more operational details of the land bank. The next one in there you see is the reference of the MOU. Typically, when we do our work, because we've done many of these projects in the past, we're able to draw on previous documents, previous resources we've developed with our projects. So these things may seem like they're pretty complicated or pretty weighty. They really aren't. I actually wordsmithed an MOU while I was waiting for my turn to present. So I'll be sending it over to Ed and Patrick for them to start reviewing. We as an organization have a bias for action. We want to move quickly. We feel like the more people start experiencing and working with the project, the more things start to take shape. So a lot of the things that we do is to design, 80% ready or 85% ready, and then know that we're going to do some wordsmithing at the end. That wordsmithing can take weeks or months. So we want to get as much of our work done and deliver to the city so you guys can start to do some of the final details. The last point on this slide, or the last activity, is selecting the board of directors. So this organization will be an independent nonprofit. The city has the responsibility of appointing the first directors, and then once those directors are appointed, they would then have succession and reappointment and vacancy appointments and so forth onto themselves. Next slide, please. So this is a timeline, just as noted at the bottom, suggested for illustration purposes, but this is frankly the timeline that I would like to work from. Which is that we start working in January this month, looking for our first candidates to be on the board of directors. So we would anticipate doing that as an open call for nominees. Those nominees would then be screened and selected based on criteria established by the city commission before they get appointed. If that was to move quickly, in February we'd be looking at nominating our first board of directors. In April we'd be looking at starting the drafting of the MOU using the base document we've already developed. And then once those directors are in place, they're then looking to hire their own staff director. In February, I will be coming out to visit and meet with some of the stakeholder organizations and city staff. We're looking in March, potentially, to have the first meeting of the board. If the MOU is started in April, we're looking at May, having the MOU be finished. If we have the staff in June, we could look at having properties going into the land bank in July or August, and by September we're looking at the land bank being fully operational. So I always tell my clients when working on land banks, my objective for you is to have your first properties under your own name with your own staff within 12 months of getting started. If we if we say that we're getting started more or less now, or let's say January, February timeframe, that means by the end of this year, first part of next year, the land bank is up and running. I also will say that I work my projects at the pace of my clients. So if my timetable doesn't meet the city's timetable, it just means these activities will get pushed further out, but it doesn't mean these activities don't need to get done. So I put this slide together to kind of show you just at a high level what needs to get done to operationalize the land bank. And the biggest thing we really need to get to, I think, is some of the framework details so we can start looking at bringing in the human capital that makes this thing run, which is the board, and after that the staff. So that's my presentation. I'll stop there and see what kind of questions you may have, or if you have no questions, I will turn it back over to you all.
Sure. So I guess I do have a question. We met back in October, and largely this presentation tonight was covered in that meeting in October. So I definitely, have appreciate the information shared tonight for the public. But I believe we as the elected body, the majority of us attended those meetings. They were broken up into sessions so that we didn't avoid any open meetings, have any open meetings violations. But I guess so we're still trying to work out what a land bank is versus implementation of a land bank. Maybe I'm a little clouded.
I don't want to speak for Brian. I think we're getting, me personally, I think we're getting to information and reports now that's really useful. So again, the makeup of a board is very important. What Brian's presenting to us is best practice, examples of things that we can try. It doesn't need to be exactly how we go about our land bank. As part of that process, I think Brian's just really kind of summarizing the type of land bank that this process would produce for us.
Okay. And then just one other question. I know we had also talked about a reverter clause with the county. Has there been any conversation with the county? And again, I know we're still in, I guess, infancy stage, but has there been any conversation with them to say, hey, we're possibly considering this or looking at this? What are your thoughts on it? Do we know? Glenn, Brandon, Brian?
So I don't mind speaking. So we had spoken with the county before we brought this to the commissioners. This was probably a year and a half ago. There was some desire to move forward, some understanding about what that looks like. I think we've broached the topic of properties for the land bank and things like that, but we still need to formalize some of that conversation with the county.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Ward 1.
Well, I'm excited about Brian, thanks for your presentation updates. I'm excited about the idea of a land bank. I think vacant properties, underutilized properties are a scourge of Cambridge. We have way too many. I think land bank can be a useful tool. I would almost like to propose a motion tonight as it relates to the land bank that we as a city council would like to see it fully functional and operating as of September 1, 2026, which is what Brian stated here. I'd like to be on the record that we'd like to see this thing happen, that we've been talking about it. Brandon, you said it was a year and a half ago or so that the ordinance was created by City Council. We're talking about another 9 months from now. Just like to have someone own this and get it done. And let's get it operational and functional. And I'd like to make a motion that we make that statement tonight, or else we revisit in September the land bank.
Just for clarity, can you state your motion again?
Motion is that City Council basically states that we want to have the land bank fully operational and functional September 1, 2026, or we'll revisit the establishment of a land bank.
Okay, so this item was for informational purposes only. I'll defer to staff and attorney. Would we say that the motion is appropriate to do?
I think it's frankly rushing it a little bit. No, because first of all, there's a very important component here is staffing. Who is going to pay for this? Is this going to come out of, for the time being, out of city coffers? We're talking about hiring an executive director. We're talking about job descriptions. It takes time to understand what is the cost going to be running this organization, because they have roughly $1 million that is in a bank account. You know, we also are talking about maintaining these properties. Who is going to maintain them? Is that going to come out of city operational costs? Because I can promise you, you'll run through that $1 million pretty fast. And then the other question, are they going to be city employees, though they're not under the city manager's control, but they're going to be city employees getting city benefits? I mean, I agree that doing this land bank is very important. We already had a nonprofit come in and meet with us the past week. Ed was there because they want to find out a way that they can, the city or this land bank can transfer properties over to them, you know, silent, you know, the deed, so there's no outstanding liens. No one's against this. And I don't know what else, I mean, go ahead.
People need deadlines. I mean, we need deadlines to get things put in place. If it's not September 1, is it the end of this year? I mean, the council should express some desire to set a deadline for when this land bank will be set up. All these issues you just raised are issues that Brian raised. Brian's our consultant. He should be helping us get solutions and get this thing up and running. That's his role.
Okay. Brandon, were you trying
No.
Did you guys want me to speak to any of those questions? I'm not sure what the protocol is here.
Nope.
Sorry?
If the council wants to make this a priority, and frankly, it is already a priority for city staff. We just met this morning. The land bank is a priority for city staff. It's my priority for my staff to get this up and running. This is the first time I've, you know, been involved in this presentation. That's great. I support it. But you're also talking about, you know, putting out a request for board members. We haven't even done that. There are things that have to fall in sequence. Do we start it July 1, budget-wise? Here, I believe we were talking about starting it in the middle of June. I mean, let's work within the timelines of city government so that it's properly funded. That's all I'm asking. It is a priority of the staff. And I don't know if Brandon, if you have any more to add, I'm sure.
I would just, so I agree it's great, we need a deadline. I think Brian White's presentation's been great. I think most of it's wonderful. I think I commented today, I thought the schedule was a little aggressive. I think September 1 would be very aggressive. I'm not sure we could accomplish that. What I would urge the commissioners to consider is that all this brainstorming that happens in this meeting, because we just asked an unforeseen question, right? I'm not prepared to answer your question tonight. And so maybe this is a conversation that we'll talk about leading up to next week's meeting, which currently has nothing on the agenda. Okay. Right? So we kind of blindside each other with these comments in a city council meeting, which is certainly your prerogative, I guess. And then what you're hearing is a bunch of people say, I don't know, I read the document 2 days ago, right? So I think our time might be better spent, and we might be quicker to get to a professional outcome if we do some of this during work time, when we're all working towards completing projects. Happy to discuss it at council meetings.
I'll withdraw the motion and let's discuss it on the next meeting.
Yeah, no, and let's connect in the next couple of days. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't come here tonight with that in my mind when I saw this on the agenda, but I'm sitting here thinking, and it's just, let's try to get our head around as a city and organization and commissioners is we need to put deadlines on things. And what's a reasonable deadline to get the land bank up and running? And we can talk about that between now and the next meeting, and perhaps if commissioners want to, we can vote on that.
I appreciate that it might not seem that way. Producing the documents inside of this agenda took in some cases a year. Like the presentation I have that'll happen an hour and a half from now was something I started working on a year and a half ago. So I guess that the idea that we'll make a motion and everyone's here ready and just prepared, it feels unfair. It feels like an unfair expectation. I'd love to work on this, and I'd like to come back with a timeline that I think is something we could maybe agree to.
Fair enough.
And Commissioner Summers, they've outlined a timeline of what they feel like will work. I mean, may or may not be set in stone, but I mean there is a timeline that's been outlined or identified that they believe will work. So fingers crossed, and just continue to work with city staff to do it. I didn't think that it would be fair and appropriate, which is why I wanted to defer to staff and the attorney. But I appreciate you withdrawing your motion. Any further comments?
No, that's it. Good discussion.
I thank Brian for coming and presenting in the housing department for moving this. I think to what Commissioner President you said, we had these meetings in October. We're in January, so this update is certainly timely considering the timelines Assistant City Manager Brandon has mentioned here. So I appreciate it. I definitely think to what Glenn you shared, if it was to move any further, I am of the mindset of where's the money going to come from, especially when we talk about some of the capital projects that we definitely need to be putting some attention to. I'm not saying that this isn't important, but I definitely would be interested in understanding how do you fund it, and just thinking about like the nonprofit aspect. We have a nonprofit that was established with CWDI, and we know the challenges that have occurred around that whole thing. And so I think to what's been shared and discussed already, just given that time to have those discussions and bringing it back is certainly appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Ward 3.
Yeah, just to echo, very encouraged by what Ed and Brian shared. Like Commissioner Louis Cisco, the funding is interesting. I think I read even in our packet somewhere there may be some like fundraising that needs to be done in order to support. I think I read that as a comment in there. And if that's part of the program and whoever becomes this board, I mean, there's it is a lot to figure out in the time that we have ahead of us. So I'm okay with letting us. And there were some proposed potential considerations for the draft documents that we had received, and maybe those considerations for minor tweaks could be appropriate. I'm okay. Fine. Learning more next session.
Thank you. Ward 5.
Yeah. Thank you for the presentation. Something that was very fascinating to me is the idea of the green infrastructure as a component that we could utilize the land bank for. Obviously, that falls well into our priorities for stormwater infrastructure and all those kind of things. So it's kind of fascinating. I would hope to see that be a strong component of this, because that is just as important, I would say, as putting homes back on the tax rolls. That said, the unfinancial sustainability of the thing is intriguing to me, because I would hope that there's metrics that allow you to justify somewhere that the land bank is at least paying for itself in the economic development of the city or something, because otherwise why create it? So if I would be interested to see metrics or ways to, on a yearly basis, track the progress of this land bank. Is it attaining its goals? And if not, there's no reason for us to develop a land bank. I mean, we're not just here to create another agency, though I'd like the idea of the expediting the property transfers and all that. That's got to be something that's maybe even quantifiable from a city standpoint, because right now it's like to acquire a property we have to go through a monthly or a very multi-month process that's incredibly cumbersome, and garage resolution and all that. My understanding is one of the real efficiencies of the land bank is it can acquire the properties, get them back on the tax rolls quicker than the city, who's just the process is not set up for us to acquire and dispose of property. So please put some metrics in there that can give me confidence that the thing, even though it would potentially require a departmental budget on the city's behalf, that it's actually net gain to the city is more than what it's costing.
Acknowledging one point, though, I think in the land bank scenario, if we're looking for a greater community good and outcome, that might hit collectively in 3 years. I wouldn't be sure that the metric was valid.
Yeah, whatever that looks like. That, I mean, clearly they exist.
It could be build, it costs,
Yeah.
and then bang.
And maybe I'm not clear on what I mean. That's perfectly acceptable to me as well. But again, Brian White, why do they exist if they're just nothing but a unsustainably financial mechanism? We've got to have a way to justify the existence of the land bank, and I'd like to see it actually formalized so that this board and executive director would prove the value of the land bank to the city commissioners upon formation and in subsequent years that it's existing and it's succeeding. So think about that. And then again, the green infrastructure component, I would be remiss to say that I would not think that's one of the most important components of this.
Thank you, Ward
Can
5.
I bring one thing up, if you
Sure.
don't mind? You have seeded this land bank with $1 million of ARPA funds. If you do not proceed with the land bank, you probably will forfeit that money back to the federal government. I don't know if Perry...
Yeah. No,
okay, I just want to
and I don't want to imply that I wouldn't at least give it a college try. I mean, there's clear benefit to the land bank, but maybe there's even a shot clock after this thing exists for 5 years. If it's failing miserably, we need to revisit whether we need this thing's accomplishing its goal. I guess that's my problem.
And I agree. What my hesitation is, we want to be prepared to get this launched so it doesn't fail. And staffing and all the operational aspects is part of this, and especially how the bylaws are set up, because we don't want another nonprofit that we had problems with. It's just got to take some deliberation. We all support the land bank. The staff vehemently supports it. The money is there. Let's get it done right. That's where the city manager is coming from.
Thank you. Alrighty. Again, this was for informational purposes only. We'll move on to item number 13, the MOU of agreement. We have the council agenda report from the chief of police. If there's anything additional that you wish to speak to, and then there's council action following that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Back in October, Cambridge Police Department, as you saw in your packets, received from the Department of Justice, COPS office, a mental health grant and wellness grant through their office for just under $120,000. This would be for embedded clinician services, for peer support for our officers, mental health, critical debriefings, and all the standards that the Training Commission is beginning to hand down involving mental health of our law enforcement and their families. So we've been working since then with the health department, and attached to your packets is a memorandum of agreement that we came up with them, working with Dr. Scott, Ms. Mindy Kelly Black of the health department, and the city attorney has looked over that memorandum of agreement as well. So we just ask for your blessing to have that signed so we can move forward. I believe it's set to expire September 30th of 2027.
Thank you, Chief. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second to...
Great question. To support the, this isn't an application, this
MOA.
is the MOU, yeah, to memorandum of
Agreement.
Thank you, sir.
pardon me, yes, to support the MOA proposed by Chief and CPD to get those desperately needed services. Looks like a great program I'm just glad somebody else is keeping an eye on all those award conditions, because wow, that's an extension.
Yeah, second.
That second remains. All right, motion and second. Any discussion?
Quick question for the chief. What happens after September 30th, 2027?
I would love to have one on staff or at least contracted out through the city. So I would be coming back to the council in another budget year or two to ask for funding for that.
Okay.
I'm just grateful to see this come to pass. It's something that's important. A lot of other municipalities do it. I often say you have someone call 911 because they feel like it's an emergency, but is it an officer that needs to show up, or is it a mental health professional? So giving our community, our officers, the resource that they need. So I'm just super excited about that. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And it passes 5-0. Item number 14, selection of 2026 Commission President, City Attorney.
Yes, so as council will recall, last year the council amended the charter to provide that the commission president is now elected on an annual basis. So this being the first council meeting of the new calendar year, it's time for the council to elect, or for the commissioners to elect a commission president. And just to clarify, the sitting commission president is eligible for election.
All right, is there a nomination of a motion of a nomination, however that's supposed to be stated?
I would make a motion to nominate Council President Cephas to retain his position as Council President for the coming year.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there any discussion?
I just want to say that, of course, the intent of us changing this was to make space for anyone that wanted to serve as council president. And I know for me, I think that, in this past year, Commission President, you've done an amazing job stepping in, running the meetings, and also supporting in the ceremonial things that the mayor could not, which was very few to my knowledge. And so I personally am not in a position to want to take the mantle or the helm of that. And so I second this, no, sir. So thank you for taking the seat and the helm last year. And it's my hope that you would continue to work.
It also allowed if he didn't want it, but I'm pretty sure he wants it because he got commission president stitched in. So if you're willing, I would agree with the consensus of the council.
I will accept the nomination, but we have to call for a vote.
Okay.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And it carries.
Plus, you need something to do in your retirement.
Hey,
Exactly.
I had a great afternoon nap today.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to meetings. We have the traffic and safety meeting, which will be held on January 15th at 1 p.m. It is a virtual meeting. The planning and zoning work session will be held on January 20th at 5 o'clock p.m. at the council chambers. The historic preservation meeting will take place on January 21st at 6 p.m. at council chambers. CWDI board meeting will be held on January 22nd at 4 p.m. at the council chambers. The next regular meeting will be January 26th at 6 p.m. at council chambers, and the planning and zoning work session will be held on January 29th at 5 p.m. at the council chambers, and the planning and zoning meeting will be held on February 3rd at 6 p.m. at the council chambers. And the Mayor's Accessibility Committee will be held on February 5th at 6 p.m. at the council chambers. And for record being, council chambers address is 305 Gay Street, Cambridge, Maryland. Right, we are at the point of the agenda where we're at public comment. At this time, anyone wishing to address the council with your public comment, you may do so at this time. We ask that you come to the podium, state your name, your address, and address any comments to the council. This is not a time of Q&A back and forth, but a time that you as the general public can address the council. Anyone that's watching the meeting via Town Hall streams, I would that you call 410-228-5808, and you will be placed in the queue. Again, we're now open for public comment.
Good afternoon. I have two things that I want to put on record. I'm going to be very brief.
If you'll just state your name and your address for the record, please.
My name is Philomena Williams Johnson. I live in the 3rd Ward, Schoolhouse Lane. I'm 63 years of age. I have lived on Schoolhouse Lane 40 years and counting. I recently developed an issue last Monday with the plumbing on Schoolhouse Lane. Okay, I hired a plumber to come to assess the situation on Schoolhouse Lane and Chesapeake Court from the developing of the Habitat program that is on Douglas Street, on Chesapeake Court. Just recently found out that all the houses on the side of the street which I live are all connected together, all plumbing. Okay, now, Mr. John Mooney, okay, because me and Miss Murray property is the first two properties that's on Schoolhouse Lane when you turn in off Call Street. So we are higher up. So the backup came up to her and I, CC's and everything in the yard and in my house and everything. So I hired this plumber to come. So upon fixing all fixtures, all plumbing fixtures at me and Miss Murray house, under the ground as well on top of the ground. At this point, I'm in debt of $1,000. I got $1,000 on the book with this gentleman right now, and every time that the water could not flow. Okay, so this is when he found out that all pipes is connected together in the back of the plumbing. Okay, so the city of Cambridge came, the guy that deals with the water, the guy that deals with the sewer. So at this time, we still have a blockage that is coming from the back of the house. Now, the city of Cambridge did break through the sewer that's dealing with the front of the properties. So I am able to flush my toilet, me and Miss Murray and everything. Okay, but Quality Plumbing had to dig every yard. Okay, so I'm on the books with this because he had to dig every yard to see where all the blockage was, how the fixtures was turning and facing and everything. So right now we still have a blockage from the back of these houses, of all our houses. Okay, I went to the city of Cambridge today because this stuff is so old. They don't even have, they have diagrams of the houses at Schoolhouse Lane, but they do not have any diagrams of the plumbing behind the houses at Schoolhouse Lane. So I'm asking for the city to step in and help me with this situation. Is there some kind of funds or program that can do something, because I can't take all of this on my own. I think I don't know how Mr. John Mooney is going to handle this. I think he's going to call the city of Cambridge and do his own inquiry. But right now, I've acquired all this cost on me, and I can't do it. The people, the contractor Harper, they hit one of the underground pipes and they capped it off, and that's kind of like stopping some flow from the back. But the city of Cambridge was able to break through from the front because they had placed a whole lot of dirt and everything in the pathway of the front way of the water flow to the sewer. But we still have an issue. The back of the houses and all these houses are connected together. As a taxpayer and a homeowner, I want to know how can I get assistance to get my own plumbing from attached with this situation that's over 1,000 years old. This stuff was probably done before all of us was born in here, and they have no diagrams of nothing how this pipe is running under the ground and how it's connected and everything. So can the city get some type of assessment going and come and help with this situation on Schoolhouse Lane? Mr. Frank, I live in the 3rd Ward. You were my commissioner. I've worked with you several times. This is just mind-boggling to me, and it's too big for me to handle. So I need help. My second issue is on December 29th, I had a unpleasant encounter with a police officer who would not assist me. I had locked my keys in my vehicle, and he would not tell me his name. He would not give me a ride. He just drove off and left me, even though I know his resources are probably limited. But as I said, I'm a 63-year-old woman, and I knew I could not walk from Maryland Avenue to Schoolhouse Lane with my health condition, with my knees and stuff like that. So I was screaming, at him, what's your name, what's your name? He didn't want to help me. I don't know why. I don't know if it because I didn't look like him. I don't know why. It would just so happen that he was a policer, and I asked a young man that was a stranger to me to help me. Okay, when he turned forward to me, that's when I read on his shirt that he was a police officer, and he refused to help me. So I have been in communication with the police department. I filed a formal complaint. I've talked to the city manager. I also have an appointment to talk to Lieutenant McGray or somebody Wednesday, moving forward to try to come up with some solutions so this does not happen to another senior in the community or anybody who's seeking help. I mean, from a police officer, if we just happen to stumble upon a police officer while we are in crisis. So, we should be able to determine what a criminal looks like and what a citizen looks like who needs assistance, and just not be denied. I just hate to think that the only time citizens can get involved in the police or be in the police car with being arrested and taken to jail. So I'm looking to try to see what ideas, what training, what more education, what more knowledge these young officers can learn on how to do better in the community when assistance with us as citizens in Dorchester County.
Thank you so much, Ms. Johnson, for those comments, and certainly, please, we can have you follow up with our city manager, Mr. Steckman, with any assistance that may be necessary. And then regarding the second matter, certainly, Police Chief Todd, I would recommend a follow up with him as well. Thank you so much. All right, ma'am, you may proceed with your comment. Please state your name and address for the record, and proceed with your comment.
Are you talking to me?
Yes,
on
ma'am.
the phone?
Yes, ma'am, on the phone.
Okay. Hi. This is Allison Kennedy, 100 Garden Lane. I just wanted to commend you for agreeing to meet together, the City Council, Green Street, and the other appropriate persons that will discuss the Hearn Skinner project. This comment is made as a member of the CAN board. One of our members has been in communication with us about his concerns. He is a local architect, and he has worked with previous owners of the Hearn. So I know that he did send out a letter to the commissioners and the city manager And he has a presentation which he wanted Cam to review, which we haven't at this time because of the holidays. But I just wanted to say that the community does have concerns and some answers that they would like to have. So thank you again for agreeing to have this meeting. Bye.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wish to make any public comment? Please approach the podium at this time, or if you're watching via Town Hall Streams, phone number is 410-228-5808.
Ann Damianos, William Street. I came tonight to hear the ordinance about vacant properties. Seems very, very vague. So, Frank, you're my man. I'd like to get together and get some more details.
I can share that.
Thanks.
And that was ordinance number
1262.
Okay, yeah, so first reading is just, it's introduced. Any other comments? Alrighty, we will move from public comment and we will move on to city manager comments.
You have my report attached to your meeting packet. One of the things that moving up the deadline date for the packets to be submitted is that didn't get in there that the city, the mayor and I and Brandon met with the Assistant Secretary of Commerce, gave him a tour of an extensive tour of the city to show him and one of his key people opportunities for business to relocate to Cambridge and to make sure that the Commerce Department and all of the departments know the city is open for business and is looking for businesses to locate here. There's also on Thursday night a meeting of the Eastern Shore Association of Municipalities where several of the delegates were also there at the dinner. And part of the discussion was on tax differential. As to Ms. Williams-Johnson's challenge, I just found out late this afternoon that there was a sewer problem over there. Wayne is aware of it. We're looking in to see if this was created by some improvements that were done over there, or is this simply because of age of our lines back in that area. So I'll be able to supply you some information in the next couple of days, but it is a priority to make sure that there is a functional water and sewer line. I don't know if, frankly, regulations have changed since, I'm sure, if some of those pipes were put in, with between water and sewer. So we'll have more an understanding, but no one wants raw sewage in their house or on their lawn, and we're going to see what we can do to get it corrected and taken care of for you. But we need to understand fully the problem, Ms. Williams-Johnson. And I did have an opportunity to speak about the other issue with the police officer. I will just say publicly it is being investigated. And he jumped right into it as soon as it was, the organization started moving very aggressively to address the complaint that was raised. And I want to make sure nothing is covered up in these type of behaviors in the city. They are thoroughly investigated. And that's the one thing I wanted to make sure everybody understood. We're not going to tolerate abuse of any of our citizens. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Mr.
And then we have Tara going to make a presentation. Okay, you got. No, you got. Okay, let me ask you any questions. She's hiding back there.
I love that.
You have my report if you have questions.
Okay. And I want to she is working, this employee, Tara, is working very hard cleaning up a lot of issues that extend back more than a couple years, some going back to 7 years, where we're closing out grant agreements, especially our CDBG grant agreements. And that's going to help us to be ranked higher with the state knowing that we're getting these grants closed out. So, then other than that, Brandon.
Yeah, I have nothing to add that's not already in the staff report. Just to draw attention to the larger registration program that includes the vacant commercial, vacant residential inspections, which we've talked about. We've got ordinances finally for all of those. And then the projected timeline in the back of that report. That's how we're planning on bringing them to you with a fee schedule update that captures everything with about 40 other changes later on. So it's as fast as I think we can get it to you, and I think that still gives us plenty of time to implement it when adopted.
Thank you so much, sir. Any questions about the Assistant City Manager's report?
I just wanted to make a comment. I thank you for, when we looked back into licensing versus registration and tiered licensing and all that kind of stuff, one of the things you do is you read the actual code and you realize that you can legislate anything you want, but really it takes, like, through tremendous effort, it sounds like, the ability to enforce and do the codes we have and build the institutional processes to do that. And I wanted to commend you because it appears as though you're getting there and you're actually able to do a lot of the things that a scheme like that was attempting to accomplish, like the tiered fees for repeat offenders and that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to thank you. It doesn't go unnoticed that that's really the hardest part of this process, is getting the institutional ability, and it's partly ours, the funding and the things that you need to actually implement with the wand.
I think I've said before, we get a lot of great ideas from residents in this community, and it isn't to act like they're not all wonderful. Turning the ship sometimes can take a little time, and I think we're doing that here. We also got to be fair to the people that we're enforcing these things on. They've been on the books for a really long time, and it feels like we're pulling the carpet out from under a system that's been in place for a long time. I'm sure we can all think of half a dozen examples where we don't really care if we're pulling the rug out from under it, but there are hundreds of examples of people trying to do the right thing. So some of this is also informing the public. But thank you for your comments.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to Mayor and Commissioner's comments. We'll start with item number 18 and actually Ward 1.
Yeah, item 18, it was just a question I have as perhaps as a new commissioner. When we're issuing citations, they are generally the mayor and the commissioners, but I'm never aware in advance. I'm not aware, we don't vote on who we want to give a citation to. Most of the time it's not an issue. Certainly the mayor, I saw the memo she wrote, she could issue, I guess, mayor citations, but is there this was more of a discussion question, not necessarily me just commenting. What is the process for us as commissioners to decide who we'd like to issue a citation? That's a question.
So, do you want to, anybody want to answer? I can. So basically anybody can request a citation.
Yeah.
As a commissioner, as the mayor.
This is the nice feel-good section of the meeting where, public groups are properly recognized and the council, and I don't want to diminish what they are doing, but you are recognizing they have contributed to the community. The staff plays literally no role unless we're aware of something that we would let the mayor know. But this is typically a mayor and commission function that if Commissioner Stout wanted something on, we would draft something or he would draft something, and then we would usually send it over to Patrick to make sure it's in the form that we use so that we're consistent. You know, he might have a particular business or group, sporting group, just like you had the football team in here. The city also supported them financially to go down to Florida. You know, I don't know what else to say.
It was just a process question. I just didn't know what the process was for deciding on who would receive a citation. So,
well, I'm going to offer a personal comment on this because I've seen the ugly side of this in my years. When the council, you know, takes an approach, we're starting to approve who gets a resolution and who not. I mean, you might want to have some guidelines. A councilman got up and voted against a resolution in front of this man's entire family and made some comments that I thought were inappropriate in that type of setting. So I just, you know, if you have, you know, we try to work it out amongst yourselves.
Okay. And I would just add to the purpose of discussion, citations, I believe at one point were literally signed by the mayor only. And I say one point like dating back, prior councils. And then we had individuals who, well, I won't say it that way. And then we had a point that the mayor then extended for the commission president, our previous administration, council president was signed with the mayor. And then we had a city manager that said, hey, I want to sign these. And then when we had commission president, she was acting mayor at the time, we presented citations to an organization, and there was a particular person in the community who didn't like her and said, I don't want this citation, I want somebody else to sign it. And so, you know, Mayor Cephas Bey, being pretty rational, said, well, let's have all the commissioners sign it so that no one feels like I'm signing a citation for you, you may not like me personally or whatever. So she now extends for everybody to sign the citations. And I mean, honestly, I guess if you don't want to sign one, that's your right. I mean, that's your signature. Don't sign it. Draw a line, an X, or just leave it blank. But you know, it's a ceremonial function. To Glenn's point, not to diminish or belittle what it does, but anybody has the authority to request a citation, and staff will execute. I mean, if it's, you know, something you don't agree with or for reasonable belief, you know, you don't have to sign or support.
Fair enough. Thank you. No further comments.
So I want to say thank you to the community that were here, those that gave public comments. I think when looking at the staff report, it's definitely good to see the priorities align with council discussion and the community needs. In the city manager's report, mention of the wastewater capital fund, capital fee, and interceptor, CPD, and the work with the mental health supports, enforcement that focuses on the non-owner occupied registration and all of that. I do want to say to Mr. Hesson, I know we have the tenant advocate position that we were advertising, but I definitely want or would like some consideration to be given to some approach or path forward for rental units in terms of code enforcement. As the commissioner for Ward 2, there were several complaints about different rental units in the Greenwood Avenue neighborhood. So just wanted to make sure that, you know, when looking at the path forward, some consideration is given for accountability for landlords or management companies. I also attended the Eastern Shore Association of Municipalities dinner on Thursday, January the 8th. The Eastern Shore delegation, as City Manager Steckman mentioned, shared some great insights on barriers. Specific, what I really thought was important was Delegate Cherie Sample Hughes, her mention of when we talk about like businesses coming to Maryland, her mention of the restrictions as well as the requirements needed to open up a business in the state of Maryland. Another thing that was mentioned is like, during legislative session, because the larger counties, they have more voice in Annapolis, sometimes our needs on the Eastern Shore are not heard as loud. So just an effort to encourage community to engage and lift up our voices in Annapolis this legislative session. Definitely want to say it was great to get the updates for the land bank. Mobile Welding Training Center that will be coming to Cambridge. I am excited about that because specifically when we think about Chesapeake College, a lot of times we're thinking about these opportunities happening in Y Mills. It's good to see Jason Mullen here tonight, but I'm excited to see that opportunity come to the city of Cambridge in February through March. I do want to mention by way of announcement, the annual traditional spring cleaning from the Department of Public Works for the second ward would be March the 23rd through the 26th. This does not include yard debris, construction debris, automotive debris, arts, or tires. Thank you, Ms. Chikwandu, for that. And I want to add in my close, just kind of recapping from the special meeting on December the 22nd. Just again to bring back up the amendment, I voted to support the amendment to the Chesapeake Waste contract for us to look at options over this next year to get better quality services for our waste pickup. I voted nay in regarding Resolution 2515 to the increase to rates, specifically because I personally felt like additional time should have been given to our citizens, to the residents, and as it pertains to the increase. And then I also voted nay, just for the record and clarification, nay for Resolution 2516, not because I was opposed to the resolution, but because I felt personally we should not have named a specific applicant, but this should have been a stance that we took in general to preserve the demolition of, to be in opposition of any proposed demolitions, if at all possible, to any of our historic properties in the downtown area. With that being said, I want to say Happy New Year to everyone that is here in the audience, those that are watching by Town Hall Streams, and to my fellow colleagues and city staff. Thank you so much.
Alrighty, Ward 3.
Just a quick appreciation to Mr. Herman, Mr. Gunderson. They hosted our comp plan subgroup meeting right here in council chambers. Appreciate hearing out all the discussion, taking all that feedback, and hopefully using it to continue to forward the process. And I really appreciated that time. Also, I got to say, we made a great decision in re-electing our council president. He and the mayor did an extraordinary job being ambassadors and leaders at the Eastern Shore Association of Municipalities meeting last weekend. Thank you for being there, Glenn. And I've got to compliment our city manager as well. Spoke extremely well. As he mentioned that tax differential was referenced, but I have to compliment the city manager on his comments regarding that topic of tax differential. So thank you very much. Thank you to Council President and the Mayor for leading that meeting. Did have Chief and I we communicated a week or so ago. Unfortunately, I received a phone call. This is not news. Unfortunately, we've had our share of difficulties in the community, across the community, with youth activity, and I want to say that was actually unfortunate behavior and criminal activity, and that was referenced at our Eastern Shore Association of Municipalities meetings. I want to thank CPD for what seems to be their 24-hour efforts in trying to wrap your arms around this and find out more. And I would encourage the community to do whatever the community can do to assist in that effort. If there's camera footage to be viewed, if there are persons who have information, all of that is appreciated. It was difficult hearing a resident in conversation, discussed that they really do appreciate what Cambridge is, and there are so many things here that they do like. But this particular individual is electing to, relocate. And, stories like that, always, that gets at you when, this place has so much to offer, yet we have gains that need to be made. And, I just appreciate what CPD is doing and everything else the community can do to work together to help right some of our ills. And that'll be my comment.
All right. I'll go to Ward 5 and then I can circle back to with my comment.
Okay. I did not attend that meeting, but thank you for continuing to push the tax differential forward. I received my assessment in the mail, and I can tell you it's incredibly difficult as a middle-class family with 2 children to see my assessment go up 64% in the last 3 years. And I think it's patently unfair what the state is doing, and the sad reality is it's not just lower income people that it's putting pressure on in Cambridge in particular, because we are double taxed. My taxes would be half as much just in the city and the county, but it actually is starting to become something that my family has to really consider, not by my choice, but by the fact that it just makes, honest to God, no sense what is happening with assessments. And I think we may have reached a critical threshold for middle-class families considering relocating to the city of Cambridge. The tax assessments that are going on, like it's got to stop, because I can tell you my income hasn't gone up anywhere near as much as my tax assessment has, and what I paid for my house versus what it's assessed at is way out of whack. So it's a problem. The only thing I can suggest to people is that they appeal it if they feel as though it's not justified. There's any ways that you can justify it. There's several ways they calculate it, but I certainly appealed it the last time it happened to no luck, and I'm going to do it again just to try to make so that my taxes are not commensurate with my insurance and other fees that go along with owning a house. And that comes out of not so much selfish concern, but concern for other families that may be in a more difficult position than even me, that are potentially being taxed out of their homes. So, that's it.
Perfect, thank you. I wanted to just offer a brief comment, and then I'll defer to Mayor Cephas Bey if she has anything. So, a couple of my colleagues have already made mention of the Eastern Shore Association Municipalities legislative meeting. Grateful for that to have taken place, and that we were able to host them in Cambridge. They spoke very highly of the meeting, and certainly kudos to Glenn for keeping that at top of mind. Wanted to also echo for Ward 4, the spring cleanup is March 9th through the 12th. And then also to make mention, there was some grumblings on social media about the trash collection, and I think it's fair to say that Chesapeake Waste is not my personal favorite, and it's probably not a lot of people's personal favorite. There was a comment around myself being a supporter of bringing that back in-house, and there were several conversations, I would say heated discussions at the table, whereas I was very vocal about let's bring that back in-house for more reasons than one. I did reach out to city manager, and through the city manager rather was able to get some information that if we were to look at bringing the trash collection back in-house, we'd be looking at an upfront cost of about $1.5 million. Year 1, an expense of about $1.9 million. Year 2, an expense of about $1.7 million. Year 3, an expense of about $1.7. 4th year, $1.8. 5th year, $1.8. So looking at over the next 5 years, we'd be looking at a cost of about $9.1 million. Versus our current existing cost each year, looking at about 1.1. Grand totaling for over the 5 years, about $5.7 million. So while I don't like Chesapeake Waste, justifying $9.1 million of funding that we don't really have compared to $5 million that we're maintaining. I think it kind of it explains itself. So while our friends over on social media, feel like we're not making best decisions, I think that, that's the best decision made at this time. We also, go out for bid and we receive no, responses. So my question for my community members are, what are we supposed to do? I don't know, other than spend $9 million in comparison to $5 million. Poor service, $5 million over 5 years versus better service for $9 million. Is that really justifiable? Commissioner Roach talked about his property taxes going up. Mine went up as well. We would definitely be taxing our residents a lot more with bringing trash back in house. Again, I don't care as much for the company because their performance, in my opinion, isn't there. But we have to be fiscally responsible when it comes down to the decisions we make with the city. So that's why we as a council voted to extend the contract and hope for better service. And sure, if we want to go back out for bid, RFP process, hope that we have some other vendors that will participate. Also, opening day for the legislative session is Wednesday. A few of us will be going to Annapolis to support our legislators and to participate in an opening day reception with the Maryland Municipal League. I am grateful for the opportunity to have been appointed as the District 1 Vice President representing ESAM, the Eastern Shore chapter of MML, for another year. So grateful for that opportunity. Thank you to my colleagues for voting me as your commission president for another year. And that's all that I have. We'll, at this time, now go to Mayor Cephas Bey.
Yes, promise won't be before you long. First, I just wanted to say Glenn and Brandon worked their tails off last week, especially during the tour. I believe Brandon talked the whole tour, probably about 4 hours, into all of the historical detail of Cambridge, anything dealing with commerce from the Harriet Tubman Museum, which is obviously in southern Dorchester County, over to the airport. So I just want to commend, our staff for doing such a great work. They gave a really great presentation to our Deputy Secretary Rice, and he also gave us really great advice as far as how we can, form better partnerships within our community with the nonprofits. The other thing I just wanted to express is that, it's really important that we become, civically, active, with our other counterparts. So for example, with ESAM, our city manager did an exceptional job expressing the importance of the tax differential. And as soon as he turned on that faucet, listen, it didn't stop. You had Mayor Meehan from Ocean City standing up, pointing at the delegates, basically asserting, this has to happen. We've been talking about this for years. So that's why it's important that we're active, because when we form these relationships with other municipalities, we are a powerhouse. ESAM has more representation than any other chapter in the ML. So as a current president, I always try to encourage our body to understand that we're stronger together. It's so strong together that, that when I went to the reception today with Senator Mounts, the first thing he said to me when he saw me, tax differential. So he already knows what I'm coming with. So I just want to just ensure everyone that we just need to be consistent, just have the same thought, just have the same wording. It probably won't happen this session because this is a re-election year, but I think if we're consistent, we'll see a difference definitely next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, we are now at item number 19, closed session. We are looking for a motion to hold a closed session pursuant to Maryland Code annotated 3-305B1, personnel, and B7 for legal advice, and B14 to discuss matters directly related to negotiating strategy or contents of a bid proposal. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Okay, second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm hoping this is short. I really am.
We are going into closed session. We ask that the audience give us a moment. But I didn't want to be rude and let it go. Operation Justice Cambridge.
No.
We did this.
It was good information. It was actually kind of like the time flew.
And it don't help that his
Time
voice
flew.
isn't.
But after a while, it was like
that monotone is.
Time slowed down.
for those of us that had to live, all of you had to live through that background he was going through. You know, it's like, yeah, we were there. Like,
Yeah.
Correct.
Hey, buddy,
Yes, ma'am. We're back in open session.
feel bad. Oh, okay.
I mean, it's nobody. Well,
Revisionist
we're not
history.
live yet. What were you about to say?
yeah.
I was gonna say, at any time, someone could say point of order, and, you know, they could just bring to the attention that they believe the, presentation is running too long, and it needs to be
Hillary taught me how to grow
concluded.
oysters.
I just
Range
let Joe.
Street.
I was
We're
on
on-
while he was up
Right.
talking.
Well, and it was, I mean, some people will be cyclical. They'll just circle
Yeah.
around. Oh, now we're back on. Speaking of.
I'm sorry. All right, we are back live. Returned from our closed session, whereas we discussed items 3-305B1 personnel, 3-305B7 legal advice, and 3-305B14 to discuss matters directly related to negotiating strategy or contents of a bid or proposal. There is nothing further to report out. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? And we are adjourned.
All in
Oh, I'm
favor?
sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the meeting is adjourned.
Good job, Dale.